All right, I am live. This is the John Ross Show on a very unusual Friday or Saturday night. I will be joined momentarily by the one and only Dan from the internet from the Power Report. Going to be talking about news, politics, pop culture kind of stuff. He will be here momentarily. Until then, I hope everyone has been doing well. I apologize for my uh, recent absence from the YouTube leftist streaming world. Been really busy. I know I've been saying I've been doing a lot of wanting to do a gaming stream on Twitch, and it just kind of fell by the wayside. But I hope that we can do a stream, or I can do a stream this Sunday, or not this Sunday, on this week, Monday and Tuesday, because I thought I could stream on tomorrow, but something came up, and so now I'm kind of gonna have to reschedule the usual gaming stream, which you can watch on Twitch. Been trying to do a little bit more gaming streaming, trying to do a little bit more interviews, like the one with Dan. That's going to happen momentarily. He had to step out for a minute. We were actually on before we went live. Before I went live, we were just kind of talking about what we were planning, what was planning to be told, what I was planning to do this interview. See, I'm already like halfway through, and I still can't even do these interview. I can't really do these intros as well. And actually, there's Dan. How are you?
Hello, humans. Good to see you. Good to see you, John. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's been a while. It's actually this for me has been really kind of a goal to have you on. It took me a while because I kind of planned these interviews out, uh, like, you know, sparing like when I can, as I'm kind of now moving into full time streaming because I've been part time for the last 2 years. So hopeful to kind of do more interviews. Uh, you know, more. See, I'm already doing word salad. I'm losing my train of thought. I thought that a little bit of caffeine here would help me, and I'm still having those
No, you're
memories.
doing fine. I find the best way, to many of my viewers chagrin because they know I talk too much. But like
Yeah.
the best way is to just like get it flowing. And
Hmm.
then as you're, going through it, like what you want to say, what you want to is what you say, and it starts to become a conversation, if that makes
Hmm.
sense.
Yeah. For me, it's just like I can't do. I try to do these intros, and then they all turn into word salad. I just flub my lines. I hate to admit it, but
Well, why do you
I
need to do an intro? I mean, like a lot of people just do podcasts or shows like this where they're interviewing people and they just like jump right into it. Like
yeah.
that's
I mean, I've done that. I've done that, and sometimes it's just better to just go that route. But other times it's just like, you have to kind of set up for the interview. You know what I mean?
totally fair.
Yeah. Well, it's Saturday, as I said just a moment ago. It's kind of unusual, but because I'm used to doing these on the weekdays, Monday through Friday. But I think I this is new. This is like a perfect time to do an interview with actually a very prominent leftist podcaster. One of them, anyway, that I've actually
Mm,
oh, well, we're both small streamers in this community, and we're both in the same boat, so to speak, uh, because given our backgrounds, our similar backgrounds of where we used to work, which we are going to get into. I'm specifically talking about the Young Turks. I'm just going to say it, but
he said it.
yeah, I said it. There it is. I said it. I we got to throw him under the bus. Well, not throw him under the bus too much, but
This is a accountability. Like
mhm,
I don't want anyone to be falsely or unjustly accused of you know, oh, this is just a way to because this is what will happen. It's like, oh, this is just a way to make content off of an established name and like get in the
yeah,
algorithm. It's like, first of all, as someone who worked at TYT and like basically invented that game, like they don't get to talk. Second of all,
Yeah.
this is, as I hope gets, illustrated throughout this interview, through anecdotes that I have, through real on the nose examples that I'm giving, is more about what I think that people should actively be doing as they're consuming, leftist media
Hmm.
in this space, which is every once in a while, check your pundits. I think that's like a Power Report saying on youtube.com/Dan from the internet. We do Power Report, our weekly show. And a thing we say is like, check your pundits every single year. Are the people you have made a habit out of listening to earning, in a very, mental health kind of sense? Are they filling your cup or are they taking from it? Are
Hmm.
they giving you valid information? Are they helping you become a better political advocate? Or are they giving you a sort of political complacency? Are they just
Hmm.
making you a consumer? And are you just like consuming the stuff more than you're,
Taking from it.
regurgitating it? And
Yeah.
I mean, not just taking it from it, but like putting it outward. Because I think
Yeah.
as the niche group of folks that we are, and we'll get to this in a moment, but like
Hmm.
as the niche group of folks, if we are who we are, as folks who pay a lot of attention to politics, we hold a unique responsibility to make sense of a lot of these, pardon the traffic outside of me, but like
No problem.
we we
I
we hold a we hold a specific sort of responsibility to make sense of the world that is happening around us and to contextualize that for our communities. Not
Mhm.
all of us may live in, you know, myself and Hassan and a lot of other streamers, I think Vouch are on the West Coast, the Majority Report, and a number of other streamers are on the East Coast. Breaking Points, Kyle Kalinske, etc. They're on the East Coast, and so like there's a lot of folks in the middle. There's a lot of folks who speak to the communities that, for better or worse, we can't. And so
Mhm.
if we're doing our jobs right, whatever show you're looking at, any show you're looking at, they should be arming you with information that makes you feel equipped and ready to go out into your world and synthesize that in such a way that you can start to convert people in your area as safely as you can do it, of course, in this world.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, for those for us too, specifically, and also like say like Sandy Lovis or Andy Ravinsky or like maybe even the Vanguard, it's like these smaller like leftist YouTube channels. It's like we're kind of in a smaller space
I,
versus like
I I won't necessarily consider the Vanguard in the same, which one of these is not like the other, but we can talk about that later if you want drama.
oh no problem. Like no diss on them, I know Gavin. He actually seems like a pretty good dude. I've actually met him in real life. He's actually we kind of found out like I met him a few weeks ago, and I would have to say like the conversations that I had with him, he seems like he means well, you know. Like even when you disagree with him, you'll be like, at least he has a point. You know what I mean?
Sure, let's bring this up later.
No problem. No problem. Um,
I,
uh,
I, I won't necessarily say I'll agree nor disagree.
oh, it's fine. It's totally fine.
Oh, it looks like we got a
Oh,
raid from
yeah,
Adrian
Adrian
Vixen. Hell yeah.
Vixen. Thank you so much, Adrian, for rating the channel. I actually, told her that I was going to do this stream, so she like retweeted me earlier. So it's great that we got the raid already. Like 15, like 10 minutes into this show, and we're already getting some good vibes from our fellow lefty, from our comrades on the left, our leftist space. You know what I mean?
Yeah, shout
That's
out
always good.
to, yes. And we got some folks still streaming from my other stream in the past.
Yeah,
So yeah,
from your show. Um,
yes.
yeah, I mean, I think for at least for us two, like for just the two of us, if we could talk without putting the other people that we just mentioned, it's like we're smaller. Like for me anyway, it's like I kind of have to like build this on my own. You know what I mean? And it's like I know that I've only been doing this for like 2 years, so I know that's probably gonna take a while for me to kind of, like, realize that, "Hey, this is something that I can do for a living," you know? And having just started full time, it's gonna be, I'm willing to kinda just let it happen,
Yeah,
if you know.
I yeah, I definitely get it. I think especially right now, Threads parent company Meta. So this applies to Instagram and Facebook, WhatsApp, I guess, etc. To that extent, they have a broader, outside of individual social platform. But that entire, bucket of companies, house of brands, so to speak, they are going to be actively censoring political content. And let's be clear, this is not because um this is the way that meta platforms led by Mark Zuckerberg have
Mhm,
figured out how to handle political situations. I'm gonna be very nice and hope that maybe this video has a chance of getting monetized. So I'm gonna refer to this as the G word. But this G word has been relevant in what do we call the situation happening in Gaza? What do we call the
mhm.
situation happening in the Congo? What do we call the situation happening in a number of other times in
In
history?
Ukraine.
Yeah. I think Ukraine's a good candidate for a lot of different things. The shipping of children, the stripping of their passports. I
Yeah,
think there's a lot of stuff that's been fairly underreported with that conflict that could apply to the G word, right?
yeah,
But as we're starting to talk about this political world, this political context, like only certain numbers of people will think about that stuff or apply to that stuff, and only a certain number of people will really take to any of that information. And so what you have to do as a streamer, as a person, is like kind of toe that line between what you think your audience, however you have built that audience, will be receptive to it versus like
mhm.
what information you really have to give. And you've really seen during this time, I think David Pakman's a great example, not to just, continue to like just to throw against
Go at
strays,
it.
right? But like there's you're getting to see how different creators are making that choice. And I've
Mhm,
been, really appreciative of people I've agreed with in a lot of different times, people I've disagreed with in a lot of different times, being able to make the right choice um in regards to this very, this is a very clear positioning of how you feel politically sort of moment versus, how I've seen a lot of people, you know, I'd definitely say like, take the easy way out, which is there's a right to defend itself type arguments and whatever we do to get the hostage back type arguments. You've seen these kind of things out there. And
yeah,
so this has been a moment of courage that I think even splits the left in a number of ways. And I
yeah,
think it's important, but also it's not indicative because a number of people, I'll name the gray zone as one example, who have been pretty good as far as this conflict goes, have been pretty terrible as far as like Syria and
yeah,
Russia, Ukraine, etc. goes.
yeah,
And so that's what I worry about is that, and we'll get to this as we get to more of our TYT conversation. But
mhm,
as the tide of history, time marches on as far as history and news and politics goes, new people come into the fold of us freaks of politics understanders. And we have
right,
to be able to give them not just the education, but I've tried to emphasize this a lot more on Power Report in 2024, is the
mhm,
foundation so that when these types of moments come, you're not just working off of a series of events since when you started paying attention to politics, because that type of thinking will have you thinking that, oh, I started paying attention to a politics since October 7th, and it seems like Palestine or the Gaza, or however you want to, Hamas, or however you want to characterize that, are the aggressors. And if you don't have that proper foundation in leftist thinking, you will be thinking that the oppressed are the aggressors. And I've seen
Mhm.
that mistake happen time and time again. And I think that's been very distinct in moments like this, where you start to see, David Pakman's a great example, but like you really start to see where people's quote unquote leftism gets split.
Yeah. I mean, I will just say, just for just like a footnote here, this is a very pro-Palestinian stream. So just gonna lay my bias on the table and not try to.
Oh! This has been a great talking to you, John. But this might not be my. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Whoa! You
Yeah.
didn't tell me it was a pro
Not
Palestine.
bad.
No, 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 no.
No, I
Absolutely.
mean, I've looked at the, like, I've not been there, but I did see go by a pro-Palestinian, uh, rally, I guess you say, protest rally here in Kansas City in our, like, our little shopping
The
plaza
Kansas side
area.
or the Missouri side?
Missouri side,
Okay.
and, they were all calling for a ceasefire, and they were having signs up, they had the Palestinian flags waving, and it's just like, man, if I didn't have this other previous engagement that I was going to that was, like, political, lefty kinda thing, I would have definitely been in that rally.
Wait,
I
was
would have
that this
definitely
today?
No, this was, like, last weekend.
Okay, because I was gonna say, like, if it was between a pro-Palestine protest in Kansas City, Missouri, and this, you chose wrong.
No, I mean, I'm happy that I actually chose today 'cause, um, like, again, we also should mention that this was actually postponed from, I think, February 10th, because I'd actually brought that up on the, Power Report show with you and Bam, and I was like, "See you on February 10th," and then we had to reschedule, and so,
Yeah, that was
thankful that
entirely my fault. I have a schedule.
it
I'm not trying to
it
be bougie. I'm
happened.
just saying,
No,
like,
no, be
yes,
bougie away, and you can also
it
be
didn't work.
bougie
It
here.
didn't work out, but this worked out. Yes.
No problem. Um, I guess because I have questions, because this is, I guess, an interview show, and so, and you're gonna hear a lot of noises in the background. Like, I have like a clipboard of questions I want to ask you. It's just like
I
front
love
and
a
back.
man who prepares.
Yeah, I mean, I try to prepare. Like, I always end up doing things last minute, so it's like, it's like, even today, I like wrote down a thing of questions like 2 hours before 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 this happened, so it's, yeah, I do tend to slack, from time to time, and I'm, like, saying slack as in slack off, not the platform that we all use, if you know what I mean, which I do
Yeah,
use
this is a
Slack.
Saturday. This is a Saturday. Please don't remind me of my day job slave driver.
Yeah, uh, yeah, I mean, this is all that I'm doing as far as, like, trying to do it full time, so, Um, yeah, so I guess the first question, speaking of, and if I look down, is because I'm looking at the notes. So, uh just for forewarning. So, I guess the first question I guess I should ask you is kind of like, how did you get started in left media? And I guess this kind of ties into the TYT stuff, like the beginning of that.
Yeah. Actually, my story of getting into left media, for better or worse, is way before TYT. And TYT is kind of like a pit stop on along that journey. It definitely wasn't the beginning and it definitely was not the end. And so I I've gotten in various ways just asked this question over the past couple of weeks in different contexts. And I would basically describe it as I was doomed from the start. If you'll check out on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Dan from the internet, I used to make these like video essays before, post 2020 COVID video essays were a thing. And I made one on Dennis Prager. And I noted how Ben Shapiro's um parents listened to Dennis Prager's radio show in the 70s and 80s, like late 70s, early 80s, when Ben Shapiro was like just being born and, a kid. So basically, like, Ben Shapiro was raised on Dennis Prager and what eventually became Prager University, like in utero, right? That's like a horrifying thought. That's a terrible thought. I am that for left media. like,
It's like
um, Go ahead.
It's like how it's like eventually what Dave Rubin became. It's
Well,
just like,
no, no, because Dave Rubin's not smart, right? Like Ben
oh,
Shapiro and
for sure.
I are well-read individuals. Dave Rubin is like a "How the Wind Be Blowing" type vibe, but
Yeah, I mean, when you were talking about PragerU, that's like the first thing that came was like when Dave Rubin made that like dreadful, disgusting, like why I left the left kind of thing, and it's just like we'll get to him too, but like it's just way how a lot of these people that were considered to be left like pivoted. For me anyway, it's just like because in Dave Rubin's case, like he thought he could get paid for it, but I didn't even mean to cut you off there.
no, no, you're all fine. So like my mom would take me to school and I would be listening to Air America, right? And
Oh, I
so like
remember Air America.
I was a kindergartner and I have vague memories of like being, shuffled off to school and like the, parents taking their kids to school on their like oversized SUVs type trip that California and the post 9/11 world was on when which I was a kid. And yeah, my mom would be the one who was listening to Stephanie Miller, Randy Rhoads, Tom Hartman,
All
Sam Cedar, Janine Garofalo.
Yeah, all great people, by the way. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, Tom Hartman's still like
Oh
probably
yeah.
one of the most based people out there. Same with like Randy Rhoads. I mean, for those who aren't familiar, like Majority Report got started on Air America before it became what it is now. Um, so yeah,
And I really appreciate you, John, because not a lot of people, only the real people know about Randy Rhoads. All right, Randy was
she's still going, man. She's on Free Speech TV. If you can
yeah.
get it like on Roku and whatnot. But
No,
yeah,
Randy
she's still
Rhoads is like what Tulsi Gabbard wishes she was.
Oh, I don't wanna go the Tulsi Gabbard route because
I mean,
there's a
like, I
lot
won't
of
go to
shit
Tulsi
with
Gabbard route, but like for a moment, Tulsi Gabbard was like, I am the like badass lefty woman with military experience who is anti-war and like I'm not afraid to, say the thing that needs to be said, even if that involves swear words. And that was Randy Rhoads, before Air America, during Air America, and after Air America, right? And so like that's what I mean when I say like she's what Tulsi Gabbard like she's what people think Tulsi Gabbard is because I think in the 2010s there are people who were like Joe Rogan who were like who's a Democrat who will just let me smoke pot but is Republican in every other way and like Tulsi Gabbard fell very closely into like that sort of
She fell into that
funnel.
box, yeah.
Yeah, she fell into that funnel, but that's not any sort of disrespect on Randy Rhoads. Randy Rhoads is a real one. So I just
Mm,
appreciate that, like, because not even I mean, Stephanie Miller always was and continues to be kind of like an MSNBC style liberal. So
yeah,
I don't love to shout her out that much. But Randy Rhoads is always like pretty hardcore. And so like I appreciate that you recognize that name. Not even
mhm.
Sam Cedar mentions Randy Rhoads that much. And there might be a valid reason for that, but I'll just say. But no, no, go ahead. Go ahead. I mean,
Well
I'll continue out my story, but I don't know if y'all want to say something.
well, I was just gonna say, like, there's a one, there's, like, a documentary on Air America that I would probably recommend. I have it in my DVD collection, and it's called Left of the Dial, and it's basically just a history of not just Air America, but, like, talk radio in general. Like, we have to kinda under how, like, this space that we're in. The other thing is, you look back in the '80s, it's like, talk radio and right wing, like, Republicans started dominating that space, and then the left saw that, and then they were like, "Oh, we think we can kind of counteract that and kinda make that business model our own." And so that's partially how Air America got started, and then it kinda fell by the wayside because it's it's like basically, um
Piss poor management.
yeah, and I was gonna say Sam Cedar did do a really good, he's done good segments, and he's talked about his time at Air America and how, um, the person who ran, Air America, donated to Mitt Romney's campaign, and it was just like, wow, kind of the irony, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Again, I don't unfortunately just because of my schedule, I would love to give you the power report 3 hours of time, but I maybe have like again, a good 30-35 minutes
Hopefully,
left. So I want
we
to make a
could
good use
hopefully
of this.
do a
But
follow-up. Yeah, we should
yeah,
definitely do.
hopefully, yeah. Let's see what we can do here. But I guess to fast forward through that, that was my basis, and so I went through, much like a lot of folks are going through and many folks have. They went like people on the right. They go through a I loved Ben Shapiro. I don't love Ben Shapiro anymore. I love Bill Maher. I don't love Bill Maher anymore. That's a thing that Emma Vigeland has talked about sometimes in the Majority
Mhm,
Report. That's something that Emma and I have commiserated about because I grew up in a very, evangelical Christian of some version of that denomination, right? Like household. And so in my escape of that, I the only the only person that existed out there was like the amazing atheist on YouTube, uh, Bill Maher and Richard Dawkins and like more problematic atheists, right? And so
mhm.
we didn't know they were problematic, just as our most progressive voice in the media
No
were
pun
our most
intended.
progressive voices were Keith Olbermann and Ezra Klein
Yeah.
and Matt Iglesias at a certain point. Like we're talking about like just before like 2006, 2007, just before Obama and just before that election, that is what we're dealing with on the left. And
Mhm.
so I think a lot of folks right now, which is great, honestly, are going through a similar experience with TYT or, insert to make this timely for time immemorium, insert leftist who has recently transgressed here. Hopefully not, but probably someday
Yeah.
me, right? Like it's just like the gauntlet comes for everybody, especially on the left, all right? Like like this is the training video. Congratulations. Someone who has been formative to your, opinions on the left and your learning politically turns out to be problematic as fuck. Hello, welcome. This is the training video, right?
Yeah.
All of these pundits, however you join to them, are part of your journey onto something different. And frankly, that is how, because I studied a lot of this in college and I'm happy to like kind of align the media world to theory, is that this is how moral philosophy, aka political economy, works. Is that there are steps along the ride from outright feudalism to fully automated luxury communism.
Mhm.
And it is important for people to go through struggles on every single part of the step to understand where they came from and where they're going. And I think that that's a really apt example, not only to like understand political discourse, but to also understand like political media on the left and more broadly, is that oftentimes you as a viewer are on a journey and the goal is to get to as close as you can so that you can pass the baton when you're absolutely like exhausted to something else, to get to that goal of fully automated luxury communism, to get to that goal of like a really strong, good media ecosystem that's not just one cult of personality or, three or four good pundits, but an actual, flourishing group of people who have discourse with each other and have agreements and disagreements, but ultimately not only push discourse forward, but take that conversation and turn it into mobilization and
Mhm.
activation for you, you,
Mhm.
John Ross, me, Dan from the internet, y'all people watching, to turn this into activism. Because, like I said, all of us who are super politically engaged are the best um, people for the job when it comes to politically engaging other people. And
Mhm.
if kill your pundits is what I've always said. And sorry to demonetize your thing because I just said that word, but like that's what we call it on Power Poise. Every year, kill your pundits. If you have someone you're watching in the political space who is not telling you how to smartly engage other people, how to smartly engage yourself, and how to put forward the change you want to, if not on the national level, at least on the local level, then maybe those pundits are not worth a damn. And you need to
Mhm.
spend your time and effort and energy on like crocheting or cooking or like some other hobby you have that fills up your cup so that you can go out there and fight with the knowledge that you get from the shows that are helping you so that you start to make a difference in your communities and those communities become examples that become replicated across, the rational state, country, world that we live in. So
Right.
to the extent that it exists.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing, like, that's missing from the left is, like, our lack of unity, especially in this, like, post Bernie Sanders era. I think that we've become all fractured and, like, obliterated, I guess is a strong word, but it's like we just have lost our focus, and I think that it's gonna I mean, time will tell, I know some folks, and I'm, like, not gonna, like, name any names here, but tried to get behind Marianne Williamson, and it just didn't work out as well as it should have, or as that should have been probably, and it's like we just don't have that person anymore. And if you look at, say, the way that the Bernie Sanders movement happened, and the way that the folks like us, as you say, and the people that are like in this chat, we just got behind this person that we thought that was actually making a difference, and here we are all these years later, and it's just like it's sad in a way to see us like become so fractured and so divided. And as someone like myself, I mean, I'm 31 now, but in the first, Bernie campaign in 2016, I was under the age of 30. I was 24. And like his first campaign like made me like want to get out and actually do something. And it's part of the reason why I'm doing this, and it's like to see that kind of it's like to see where we are gonna go as the left, if you get what I'm saying. It's like we can't really predict the future, and it's just like, wow.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. Like we can't really predict the future. And I think to that, we I think one there's been a lot of too many, honestly, like
Yeah.
reflections, especially from the left, on like the Bernie 2016 campaign, the Bernie 2020 campaign, und so weiter, right? And so that being said, to add another one, like another Monday morning quarterback posted onto the pile, I think one is about how are we really thinking about the future and how are we really thinking about the left? Because I think Bernie Sanders had this in his brain with his whole not me, us, think about someone who is to, the side of you who you don't know and try to fight for them, to paraphrase like Bernie Sanders' like flagship speech as we were heading into 4 years and some change ago, right?
Mhm.
That was I think that spirit was there, but in practice, the Democratic bench, especially to the left, to the center of the party, to the acceptable part of the party, to the fact that we understand the Democratic Party is a party of social climbers, and you get on the ladder and you wait your turn, and you hope the ladder isn't pulled up in front of you because you don't fit what the party wants. In that kind of context, we knew like the folks who were gonna follow up that kind of ladder, your Gretchen Whitmer's, your Julian Castro's, your Gavin
Mhm.
Newsom's, and then you also knew the folks who were going to try to, buck that ladder. We
Mhm.
don't really know so much if like a Pramila Jayapal or an Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, like they really want to run for president right now. I don't think they'd be great picks to run for president right now in 2024 or even
Yeah.
2028, right? But there are people to the left of that Democratic Party establishment who would be great. That being said, like coming out of 2020's Bernie campaign in February, I think there was just, a lot going on with pain from the Trump administration, the rat effing of February 2020, where Bernie lost South Carolina and, by extension, Super Tuesday and a lot of other momentum.
Yeah.
And of course, the pandemic. We lost a lot of momentum to start to build some great left voices. And so I really appreciate, especially being someone who is in an extremely blue state who can afford to lend my voting power towards building third party power.
Mhm.
I appreciate that now. Um, the Party for Socialism and Liberation doing business in California as the Peace and Freedom Party, or
Mhm.
folks like Cornel West who may not be totally perfect. Marianne Williamson. Um, I'll even throw in like a Cenk Uygur in this case, right? Like just for the hell of it, right?
Yeah.
They're not perfect candidates, but they are trying to push the party left, either within the Democratic Party or outside of it. And they're building that infrastructure, specifically the candidates that I mentioned that aren't Cenk Uygur running within the Democratic Party, um, to make sure that during the midterms in some of these blue states, people like I forget what it's called, but I think it's like the Working Families Party somewhere in the Midwest and also in New York State, who are able to like have some power and have more infrastructure to be able to get more candidates on the ballot. So that way,
Mhm.
eventually we get a PSL candidate or Working Families Party candidate or a DSA candidate who
Mhm.
gets to the House of Representatives, who
Yep.
gets
Yep.
to the Senate, who eventually will have to caucus with one of the big parties, but like, okay, now that's a voice. So we don't have to rely on uh G word apologist Bernie Sanders, but we can
Mhm.
also like start to build an actual coalition of third party power from the left
Mhm.
in this country. Because believe me, as I'm going to do on some other shows I speak on to, or the right of center from what I usually do, the right of center is trying to build that power right now.
Right.
And I would rather us get control than like the occasional libertarian caller to the Sam Cedar show getting control of that
Yeah,
third party
getting
power and that
angry,
third party momentum in
flipping
the
out,
US.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We
I
had the Tea
mean,
Party already. It sucked.
yeah, and it's like, with the Occupy movement, it could have been something like I remember that pivotal moment. It's like, I was living in this, like, small town Midwestern conservative, like, very, like, just, like, very red state as I do now. Like, I live in a very red state, and so, like, to see the Occupy movement, to see people my age at the time, like, rally against the corporate establishment, rally against Wall Street, rally against, like, what they call the Lehman Brothers and, like, Fannie and Freddie and all those, like, big capitalist, or, like, walls, like, corporate. I'm just rambling on, but like corporatists, if you get what I'm saying, it's like to see them just like rally against that. That was a movement that I'm sure that we all got behind, at least those on the left who wanted to see what I would consider hopefully progressive change. Although the word progressive itself is like very underused. And the other thing, like, about like third parties, I mean, I'm not going to mince words, and I am not voting for Joe Biden. I will vote this election, but unfortunately I won't be not be voting for Biden. So if there's anybody like that's like telling me that I'm wasting my vote or I'm throwing to the Republicans, I would just say, F that. You know what I mean?
Listen,
I'm just
I may have had a different opinion before what has gone on with Israel and Gaza, but considering that situation, and again, an always latent feeling I had sitting from the pedestal of living in a blue state and continuing to live in blue states, I cannot under any circumstance tell you, or especially someone who, heaven forbid, is Palestinian and has people, not that being Palestinian is bad, but unfortunately has family in Gaza who are currently being brutalized, terrorized, and unfortunately murdered at the hands of Israel.
Mhm.
Um, there's no way I can sit from any kind of pedestal and tell you, I want you to vote blue no matter here, and if you don't, there's just a vote for Trump.
Yeah.
I can't like I still feel. Listen, I think like Ole O'Leary did a great video on this, which
Yeah.
is an opinion I've always had, which is voting is a tool of many that you have. One of these other tools you have, which is what I've emphasized a lot, is local activism and canvassing and policy pushing by smart individuals who are plugged into this political content on a day-to-day basis, i.e., y'all who are watching this. YouTube.com/Dan my 20th like big video essay
Plug away,
type
man.
thing
Plug away.
was that thing was like, how do you become change from being a political hobbyist to being a political activist?
Mhm.
Um, Informed by Jane McAlevey, like the queen of union organizing. I used a lot of
Mhm.
her material for, sources for that book, for that, piece, right? And so I encourage people to check out her book, honestly, more, but also check out that video once you find it, because it's been like deprioritized in YouTube algorithms. But
Yeah.
that point is so that like we need to be pushing towards that type of active action as opposed to any sort of like anything counter to that, like
Yeah.
anything that's trying to fight against that effort to make a change.
Yeah. I mean, I do wanna get into the TYT stuff now, but, like, I will say, like, I think what your point there of having, like, third party candidates or third party like, I don't wanna call them politicians because it's, like, a very, very overused word, if that makes sense. Um, but, like, third party candidates, whether it be a socialist party or a green party or, like you say, peace and freedom, or maybe like a DSA type candidate, like we do need those voices. I completely agree, like 100%. We do need
Yeah.
like voices from the third party. They need to be on the ballot locally. There needs to be issues from them, like seen and heard, like nonstop, 100%. It's not just all the what I would call this like purchase politics from this
Yeah,
duopoly that is.
I want to emphasize that as well. Like, yeah, that's kind of say like use voting as a tactic, and if you see that, like, okay, like Olai said, if you view like I do that Democrats are easier for leftists to fight against than conservatives, who are absolutely will demonize and villainize every single person and argument that we try to put forth to put leftist change to this country, make that decision based on that fact, and also make your decision down ballot based on those facts. If you really want to be about it and be like, oh, I've read my theory, I know I'm smart, and I know that voting doesn't matter, okay, spend that action looking up your judges. Spend
Mhm.
that action looking up your local judges. Honestly, if you believe that you are just above politics and you have just like figured it all out, spend that action looking up your local judges, because no one does. And your city, your county, etc., needs a voter guide.
Yeah.
All right. So if you're about that
Yeah.
action, if you're really going to stand on business, look up your judges that are going to be running in November in your area.
Yeah.
Because if you want to tear down the system, if you want to uphold the system, but make it better and more, respectful for people, whatever, no one's going to be paying attention to that. And so if you do, and you gain some influence and you start talking about that, then you can actually change an election. Like,
Mhm.
go for the weakest point in go for the pressure points in every single part of our local election system, and boy are there many. Find them, attack them, gain influence in your local area, and start to help other votes from that, because
Yeah.
I can sleep easy at night knowing that occasionally people listen to me. And occasionally people actually don't just like watch my show and get mad and share a post of what I do, which I
Yeah.
appreciate when it happens. But like, they call their legislators, they call their neighbors, they actually affect local change in their area, and then they tell me about it. And I'm like, if one person out there does that, I'm happy and I can go to sleep at night very easily.
Yeah, yeah, same, same, all that and more. We just need more, as I say, we need more people outside of the duopoly. We need more people outside of the two-party system to make the change, have their voices heard, but also like either like you said, tear the system down or, make the system like build up on it, but make it better. That's vastly important. And fingers crossed, I wanna be part of that world, like, definitely part of that world.
Yes.
Yeah, so I guess the going back to my question here because we went off on a weird tangent, which was actually was very good. Was very good. It was worth it. Um, like what speaking of the whole like left media thing, like what got you interested working at the place like TYT?
Um, so yeah, in a typical Dan, I'll try to keep it short, but I obviously naturally won't, and despite my best hopes. Nice setup by the way, John. As a real professional, you got the boom arm, you got like the
Oh,
little
thank
mic
you.
thing. That's really good. You sound really nice. You're doing great. You're doing great.
Oh,
I'll say
thank
that.
you. Yeah, I've had this set up for 2 years. I mean, if you could see me like a few years when I started out on like a crap ass like MacBook Air, it just is not good. Like if you go back, like I know you tell people now to go like watch my channel. If you look at like my very first episode from August of 2021, I mean, just turn it off because it is so cringe. Just like skip it because it's disgusting. It's just so bad. And I hope that I've improved with time.
I mean, that's the goal in general. But yeah, could you repeat the question just like real clean?
Oh, I guess what got you interested in working at TYT? Like, I guess, yeah, if that makes sense.
So, kind of like I said as a prelude to this conversation, that every once in a while you should let me say this better, exile your pundits. You should
Mhm.
evaluate the people that you're listening to. You should see if they're filling your cup or they're emptying your cup, so to speak, in a similar framework as a glass half full half empty kind of context for how politics goes. And you should change who you listen to and adjust who you listen to from that. And so I came from, you know, folks who were exposing me to a lot of liberal, capital L, liberal in the Democratic context media, right? And so they, because of that, like I was exposed to a lot of MSNBC, CNN, you had Anderson Cooper, you had Fareed Zakaria, GPS, you had Rachel
Wolf
Maddow. I mean, even
Blitzer,
before
yeah,
Rachel Maddow, I mean, Wolf Blitzer, he's always been boring. But I think Keith Olbermann was really the killer, I think, right then around that time.
yeah,
Like, he was the one who
like
was, he,
2003 era, like Bush anti-Iraq. Keith Olbermann was like interesting.
yeah. Yeah, like especially as a kid, where like I'm sure there was more stuff on the internet. Like back then was I think, not a perfect version of the internet, but I think the best version of the internet in retrospect, where like everything was very federated. Everyone had like a forum and that forum had their own rules. It was kind of like Reddit, but like not on reddit.com. So like even more decentralized. And like every particular interest had its own forum. And that's how it worked. And like if you don't know, now you know. Like that was like the whole situation. And so like that stuff existed, like that was the quote unquote blogosphere that folks like Matt Iglesias and Ezra Klein, who I recently attacked in a youtube.com/Dan from the internet Power Report episode, the Hotep report that we did on February the 22nd. So check out that episode if you can find it. So yeah, like folks like Ezra Klein, who we attacked in that episode, came from this blogosphere. They came from this era of we are against the Iraq war. We and Felipe, you're right. Watching in the chat, Maddow also came from Air America, so I guess she applies to
Yeah,
you. But
definitely. Thanks
at
for
least
the
in my brain, uh, bad lefty. Now you know, comrade. You know my reference. You saw me. You saw me stop myself. But yeah, I would say that like especially watching Keith Olbermann, I was kind of getting in this type of my brain that like this is not enough. This is not the furthest I can go in liberalism, and like in an Aaron Sorkin West Wing, what eventually
yeah.
became the newsroom kind of way. This feels very poetic and dramatic and like of the time. But you know what? Like I have a personal experience of politics not being like that. And I have a personal experience of politics being really real and like Keith Olbermann ain't got no special comment for um whatever shooting happens in a black neighborhood in the Bronx in New York, or South Side of Chicago, or South Central in Los Angeles, or wherever in the South of, yeah, the deep South in America, or whatever else it happens, the school shootings that we have all over the United States.
The
There,
shooting
this
that
is
we had sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but the shooting that we had at the Chiefs parade this past
yes,
week.
yes, literally. No, no. Thank you for interrupting. That's a perfect analogy to that, especially like a Kansas City, Missouri thing.
Yep.
Um, yes. I won't go into the
I
sports
didn't
thing. I want to go into the sports anecdote. I'm just like stopping myself because I'm already on a tangent, right? But
No, go on a
I
tangent away.
no, no. I think that all of that, like, balance, like accounting all of that, is crucial. And so, given that that's what you had, that's what you were following, and thankfully, because I was watching Keith Olbermann, I was also watching the stuff that was on MSNBC before that, and on MSNBC before that was a guy named Dylan Ratigan. This is what I wanted to
Mhm,
get to.
yep,
So this is how I got involved
I
in
remember
TYT.
him.
Dylan Ratigan, don't look into what he's doing right now. It's like a weird niche, like financial thing, not great. But again, back at that time, Dylan Ratigan was the guy. Like Dylan Ratigan was so intense. CNBC was like, no, you're too political, you're too wild for us. We're gonna need you to tap the brakes and keep it pushing on MSNBC real quick. Like, you just need to go over there. Like Mad Money, like that guy, Bad Money, didn't even get
Yeah, Jim
that kind of
Cramer.
treatment.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jim Cramer. Dylan Ratigan was just the only person on CNBC who, during the 2008 financial crash and during like Occupy Wall Street, was saying the obvious thing, which is that the banks, the big banks, and the people behind them, behind those like big hedge fund accounts and those subprime mortgage accounts, because that's what it was. He was the one who was going on TV and saying, I have all the big fancy finance degrees, and I have all the big fancy finance credentials from being on like the finance TV show. And I'm here to tell you that they went to Las Vegas with your livelihoods. Like, that's exactly what happened. What you feel happened deep down is exactly what happened. And guess what? The Republicans did a lot of it. And guess what? The Democrats helped them. And so he was one of the few people on MSNBC who had smoke for both parties. And so when
Mhm.
Dylan Ratigan had, needed the usual break that hosts need from time to time, he invited Cenk Uygur to be his co-host. And Cenk Uygur went even harder on both parties.
What year was this? Was this in the 2011 era? Because
Yeah,
when
this is
Jank
like between 2010 and 2013.
I think I know which one you're talking about because I know, like, for example, when Jank did, like, the trying to get TYT on MSNBC and, like, went after the Obama administration a lot more than Phil
Yes.
Griffin wanted him to, and, like
And there's current TV and there's all that stuff
yeah,
that'll
yeah,
happen. So I joined in the current TV era. I had
yep,
seen Cenk from his Dylan Ratigan appearances, and so that's how I started following the Young Turks on the internet, because YouTube. I was already watching YouTube, but I was like a 10-year-old kid. Most of what I was watching on YouTube was like machinima, like
mhm,
video game like videos and shit. So like
yeah,
I started watching the Young Turks from there. That's how I discovered them. And then I found out they were like on current TV. Al Gore
mhm,
created this channel, blah de blah de blah de blah de
yeah,
blah. Let me continue.
yeah,
I found my way to get an internship there. That ended up working way better than it should have. That I ended up being able to parlay that into a remote job in the year 2014 when I was
mhm,
graduating high school. So I was able to go to college in Northern California while TYT was based in Southern California. So like 500-mile difference, same time
yeah,
zone, 500-mile difference.
easy
And I
drive,
was
I
still,
hope?
at that point, you just fly. Honestly,
Oh,
it's an hour flight or an 8-hour drive. Sometimes you
gotcha,
would drive, but I wouldn't bring my car to school.
yeah,
So I would just like fly down. So you know, I'm Taylor Swift. That's how it is.
yeah,
But yeah, so I would help in those contexts. That put me in a really interesting position where I got to help develop The Breakdown, which started as a
Mhm.
show with Hassan Piker.
Yep.
You may have heard of him.
Oh, yeah.
And then,
Who
eventually
hasn't?
expanded to Francis Maxwell,
Never heard of
a
him.
number of other folks. Yeah. Um, and we developed a format for Facebook that worked really, really well. And I
Mhm.
was writing and I was helping to write scripts for Hassan. I was helping to, yell at his hard headed ass when he was doing something or saying something um not progressive, and then retranslating that into his thing and helping him debate folks like Charlie Kirk
Mhm.
and ultimately other folks that he's gone on to debate, which he does all the time on his stream. And
Yeah.
yeah, like that was a great thing I got to do. I got to work with John Adirola. I was one of the founding producers of the Damage Report. We
Yep.
got to, that's become a wonderful channel, and I'm like John Adirola is one of my favorite people on earth. I also, not by choice, had to work on Jimmy Dore's show. So I
Yeah.
worked on Aggressive Progressives, which used to be the members show, which
Mhm.
Agitprop replaced, which it wasn't on purpose that Aggressive Progressives and Agitprop have the same titles, but it made producing things a lot easier because we just copy pasted a lot of the templates. But like
Well,
either way, like I got to work behind the scenes really closely. Anna Kasparian did a show called No Filter.
yeah, I
That was like
remember.
her own exclusive show. I was her like one of her lead producers on that. I worked very closely with her. And yeah, I really felt that I tried to take my own developing leftist politics. By that point, I had realized that Keith Olbermann was a blowhard and Bill Maher
Mhm.
was a racist, but I
Yeah.
hadn't quite realized some of the more problematic things that were
That
apparent, but not things I was working in at that point. Um, Aspects of TYT. And so I was still in that point trying to make sure that from the platform that TY2 was working from, I was pushing them further left, like
Mhm.
inviting, making sure folks like Michael Brooks and Richard Wolff and
Yeah.
Noam Chomsky, don't come at
Yeah.
me with smoke, but like folks like those got
No.
into the discourse, and making sure that we addressed figures like Ben Shapiro and
Mhm.
the Daily Wire crowd and Charlie Kirk and Dennis Prager, to make sure that we're keeping track that, like, yes, a lot of the media is driven by Fox News, but a lot of the younger generations, like what we're seeing at TYT, the younger generations are watching YouTube. So like
Mhm.
make sure you pay attention and keep watching your competitors on YouTube, because they are as slash more ridiculous than the other folks you're
Yeah.
kind of thinking about. So
Watching people like us, like you, like me,
yeah,
project
yes, us,
like
us wild folks. But no, like at that point, like really Shapiro, all those are the types of folks. So um that was kind of came out there. And then to really speed through things, around 2020, literally 4 years almost to this week, for a number of different reasons, I decided to leave the
mhm.
company and do some private sector work, some of it more related to media, some of it not related to media. And then in my free time, still continuing to develop my own shows that I had kind of started during that TYT era. One of
Mhm.
which is Power Report, which started as the Syndicate 23 Political Report.
Mhm.
Um, More on that any other time. That's more Dan
Yeah,
Miller. Check me out on this thing. And the other one's Audio Face, my music podcast, which I had done since 2017, which
which I
was
can't find for some reason. I've been trying to listen to it on, like, Apple.
youtube.com/audiofacepod. We have the podcast. The podcast is there. We haven't published episodes in a while, but we've kept recording for a long
Mhm.
time. And so it's just my job to get things more published, slash um if you start to support us on YouTube or on Twitch or at Syndicate 23, we have more resources. I operate a co-op instead of a full-on like business where CEO gets everything. But the co-op, everyone owns parts of this company eventually. And so if we get more support, then I can publish more of this backlog over this year, which I plan to get into myself anyways, regardless. And yeah, folks will see more of that. But we do one of the best, like, Anthony Fantano is not far left enough for us, and so we do one of the best music review podcasts out there. And we've been out here for 7+ years, so we are
Nice.
very good at this. Yeah.
So, like, I wanted to real quick. I wanted to bring up this comment from my former fellow TYT moderator, Vidingale, about John Idarola. She says John Idarola was great until his spine crumbled in the face of transphobic and racist rhetoric. Also refused to read the hashtag TYT mods quit letter. And I guess the thing I want to bring up, like, kind of segue, was like, what was the day to day life working at TYT? But I guess this new question kind of, thought up just now is, does that break your heart to see where, like, what has happened, at least on the main show? I mean, because you had people like Benny Carollo there, who is just like amazing. She's done great work on Twitch. She was part of like the TYT Twitch channel. And then she left under obviously bad terms because of the transphobia that Jank and Anna were espousing. Obviously, the infamous birthing person tweet. I mean, I don't want to have to dig it up and talk about it again, but it's there because it's just a part of history. It's like, and that was the thing that kind of broke my heart is, yeah, John Idarola is a good dude. I don't know him, but I watched the Damage Report the day when he said what he said about like trans men are men and trans women are women. But I feel like he came up short, meaning even if his heart was in the right place, he came up short in like saying, look, I condemn my co-host for what she says. I don't completely agree with her. And the other thing that bothered me was they did not, especially John, did not acknowledge Benny's importance to the network as far as like bringing trans issues to a greater importance. And so I guess what I'm trying to phrase here is, does it break your heart having worked there for I think it was like from 2013 to 2020? Does it break your heart to know like they've become where they how they've become problematic, at least on the main show? Like not everybody's like that, but like the main show has just become so problematic that it's just like, man, this is not what I signed up for in the beginning. This is just really embarrassing.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that I mean, I don't make a lot of, you know, big hay about this, but arguably, like, I was the first, like, TYT mods quit slash TYT producers quit type person. Like, I was one of the first producers who, like, I've seen enough. There was a, as someone has been talked about, like, unionization effort that was going on around that time, and
Yeah, I remember that.
I had seen some things I personally did not agree with, and so even on those principles, I was kind of out of it, and I was, also as a news person, kind of seeing what was happening with COVID bubbling up, and so I had made my own sort of exit, and quite frankly, I thought I was gonna just like leave politics and news for good. Like I was just gonna like
Mhm.
cut to my economics background and just, fade into the darkness. But I just, a lot of the events of 2020 made it hard for me to do so. And thankfully, I had Bam, Caesar, Sean, all the folks who have made up Power Report, Audio Face, and now Syndicate 23, the co op that makes all this stuff happen. Um, Thankfully, those folks were there as like my anchor and my rock to kind of keep me sane through everything that happened there. But yeah, absolutely, especially the recent things, um, as a producer there, one of my final jobs was someone who did special events and special coverage. So anytime you saw any election coverage from like 2019 to 2020,
Mhm.
or like March 2020 to be fair, that was me. I was behind the scenes on that. So when we would do rapid response to what happened during a debate, or when we had election coverage and we had like numbers and graphics on the screen, there's a big team behind that, a wonderful team of folks. I was definitely not the only one. I would definitely not take credit for that. If anything, I was just the moron who was just like trying to make sense of it all. That being said, I was top moron who was like trying to make sense of it all, while all of the other smart people were. making sense of their own individual roles, and I had to like make sense of that entire role to executives and to the host, and like make that
Mhm.
a process where like Jenk is watching a moment during the debate or like watching a speech, or like Anna is across the country and on the debate stage, or Emma is across the country on a debate stage or whatever, and we need to patch into her at some point while we're
Mhm.
running these clips. Like I'm the brains behind that entire thing. And again, of course I had help.
Yeah.
um I love Felipe saying top moron should be the highest subscription tier. I'll think about that. I have a definitely better name, but it's not going to be top moron. Yeah, that's kind of how I felt. And so I say all that to say I had a very intimate, close, relationship with a lot of these hosts, and we would argue out, like me and Hassan, me and John, me and Anna, me and Jank. Me and JR, like we would all argue out these ideas and opinions, and we would come to things very differently. And oftentimes, all the folks on TYT would check me on something I was wrong on, and then I would be able to check them on something they were wrong on. And I again, there are lots of places you can just work out and make a lot more money and just shut up and not care about these things. But I wouldn't have worked at that place for that level of money if I didn't not only one care about those things, but two feel like those things I cared about were heard. And so
Mhm.
I genuinely felt up to and possibly after once I put in my 2 weeks, like I genuinely felt that that was the place that I could just say how I felt, and that was respected and heard and actually processed. And, a lot of folks would, realize that and feel that. Um, I think that over time, and this is again, part of your framing of your question was like, you know, John's reaction to certain things and Anna and Jenk's reaction to certain things. And I won't I won't speak too much to any of them because I think like they should speak for themselves, honestly.
No,
Not
not
only
at
do
all.
I like not know all about that, like I don't know their context. I don't feel right and comfortable speaking about that.
No,
I'll
not at
say from
all.
my own perspective that like um over time I have sorry,
It's
ambulance. I'll
fine.
give it five
Yeah.
seconds.
I live I live in the like in what we call the midtown of Kansas City. I know how you feel about ambulances and fire trucks and police cars just like zipping by and the sirens going off. Happens all the time, man.
Yeah, we just had a fire truck. I live
Oh.
near a fire department, two hospitals. It's fun for the whole family. But yeah, I will say that I have definitely felt personally saddened, especially given the work that I did to try to push the main show, the hosts individually, um, further to the left and like keep them abreast of what's going on left of center, because
Mhm.
everyone has their own biases and where they hear things from and where their blind spots are. And that applies to me, myself, and everyone else you look up to. Um, Perhaps Jenk's best advice he ever gave to me was like, don't idolize me or anyone else. Because,
That
the
was
first time you meet Jenk, I was just like, hey, you know what? I appreciate you. Like, I really look up to you. He was like, you really shouldn't. You really shouldn't look up to anyone. He said that to me in 2013. And you know what? Like, amen. Broken clocks, right? Um, but overall, like to answer your question straight up, like I'm very saddened, especially when unfortunate stuff about crime comes up on TYT and they're talking about LA, and it's like I can tell where this coverage is coming from, and I've talked about that a little bit with Benny and Sandy Lovas, who are former TYT contributors, who them along with me a little bit have sort of been blacklisted from the network now.
yeah.
Um, but like we talked about how you know in our own communities we see how this rhetoric starts from the internet and starts from these like really weird places. It used to be 4chan, but now it's these Instagram, Facebook groups, or these like really niche right wing coded communities. And then it starts to bubble up to Fox News picks it up, and then CNN picks it up. And
Hmm.
it used to be the kind of thing that, like, okay, just because it's being picked up, I think that's an opportunity to, frame and contextualize how the media is covering this versus how the left should address this in this overall picture of, okay, you're watching the show, I'm hosting the show, I gathered a lot of information for you. Here's some information, process that information, do something with that information, right? Like, in that flow, I think at some point they've lost sight of the fact that they have a huge platform and they have a lot of respectability having done the show for 20 plus years.
Hmm.
And rather than regurgitating the right wing talking points that come from, random Facebook blogs to Fox News to CNN to etc., that their best moments in history have been fighting that those arguments,
Hmm.
not being able to be like quote tweeted by Ben Shapiro and Matt Walsh and like
Or
people like
Carrie
that,
Lake.
Carrie Lake, or who's that, like Jesse, I forget,
Jesse
but there's
Singal,
Jesse Singal, yes, thank you.
who like,
Like,
yeah,
not being able to be quote tweeted and go like, "Oh, look, even the progressives of the Young Turks agree with me," because then you're doing so much damage because you call yourselves homo progressives, you've represented yourselves as progressives, and that very act is starting to water down the term. As though Nancy Pelosi with the Congressional Progressive Caucus hasn't done that enough already, right?
yeah,
But like, it does so much. And then the crime stuff as well, the anti-black tinge things as well that we've covered on Power Report,
yep.
youtube.com/Dan from the internet, and how the left is so white, no offense, but like,
No,
we've covered
none
these things
taken.
very closely and very
Hey,
acutely. And
I
it takes a lot of, sorry, it just takes a
no,
lot of this month. It takes a lot of reprogramming and deprogramming to an audience that should be on our side. And
yeah,
rather than spending that effort, like just, having a big tent, we now have to be like, okay, let's go back to Dan and my own political journey. Now I have to do the unlearning that I had to do from, Stephanie Miller liberalism to Bill Maher, Keith Olbermann cringe liberalism to Ezra Klein cringe Keith Olbermann liberalism to Cenk Uygur Young
mm,
Turks Keith Olbermann like liberalism to like, now I have to do some like more sets of reprogramming. And like, now we have unprogramming people from Destiny and unprogramming people from Vouch and unprogramming people from Aiden Ross and Andrew Tate and all these other like weirdo figures. And it's
yeah.
like, it's enough work, especially
Andrew,
for people who are going through these experiences to have to like undo. Like, please, no, do not like add on to that. And
yeah.
by, I will say frankly, and I will say this explicitly to Jenk and Anna, because I don't think, you know,
Anna
there's
blocked me on social media, by the way, so don't be afraid of throwing like saying anything right now. She's not going to see it.
I'm not necessarily afraid, really, nor do I really care. Like, if Anna has my personal phone number, she can say whatever she wants to, right? Like, but I think that there is a certain, and I'll say this again, just about Jenk and Anna. I think that while you mentioned something about John Idarola, some people in chat have said stuff about Rashad Ritchie. I think there's like more. They, John Idarola and Rashad Ritchie are hosts. Anna and Jenk are hosts, but they also hold executive levels at the company. And
Right.
so they have hiring and firing power. And so John and Anna are longtime friends. One of them has hiring and firing power.
And I
I think
pretty
there's like, and there are people, yourself included, a lot of the mods who put their jobs on the line for
mhm.
this. That's not to like, apologize for what they did. I just, will just state that fact about the not always visible company structure of TYT and the fact that, like, A, this is a futile, effective a company structure, and this is why Syndicate 23 is a co-op. YouTube.com/stand for the internet. Please check out what we're doing. And also a status in the fact that, like, yes, you would expect stronger things from these people, but like Rashad Ritchie's career, he's doing really well thanks to the show. John Adirola was about to go on paternity leave, rather, thanks to the show. J.R. Jackson in a similar situation as well. Again, these are people I'm not going to speak for. I read these people as not necessarily stubborn or non, you know, understanding of the cause. And I think it's totally fair to criticize them for not speaking out more. I'm not saying not to do that. I'm saying that they're not the people saying the things, number one.
Yeah.
And number two, on just the corporate company hierarchy and structure, Jenk and Anna are not only the people saying the things, but they're the
Mhm.
people with the higher firepower.
Yeah. Did
So I would invite people to consider that as well.
did
Like
you ever?
that, just like all of us, we have material conditions, and like, some of us wish we can be like maybe more pro Palestine in our workplace,
Mhm.
and then also some of us realize that there's a certain line between me expressing my true political beliefs that are just moral values and me getting fired so hard that I can't pay rent at the end of the month.
Right. Did
And
you
that's a material condition for, just because we're on fancy TVs and cameras and stuff, that's a material
Yeah.
condition for everyone.
Well, this is actually a what do you call it? A local. I bought this setup at a local computer shop, a used computer shop. So I'd rather go there than the nearest like brick and mortar store, if you know what I mean. Um, did you? Because were you ever on camera at TYT? I don't remember you ever being on.
Here and there.
Um, did you ever like go to them and try to pitch a show? Did like do like a power report kind of show, or was it more just like, no, we already have, you know, you're grinning, so I'm assuming that you did and what the response was.
No one's ever asked this question before, but I think you kind of expressed the long and short of it much faster than I could. I've had, yeah, an idea of, maybe an old school, let's say, but with a different, let's say, cast and crew of folks has been presented and has been done. There have been times where everyone who would normally do old school or like another show or just like on vacation, or someone drops out last minute and I end up hosting the show. That exists. You can
Yeah.
just search my name if you're a TYT member still in the app, and you'll just like find some like, oh, he interviewed that candidate on the conversation. That's weird. Like literally, I borrowed John Adirola's blazer because I was like, hey, I'm not gonna make you host this. I just need to borrow your blazer so I can host it.
I'm pretty su was he happy about that?
Yeah,
You
because
borrowing the blazer?
oh, no, because well, I mean, less so borrowing the blazer, more just like he didn't have to host things, because
Oh,
whenever that in the 2020 election, John was just, maybe folks will remember, was just like routinely sick. And
yeah,
so anytime Jenk or Anna had to be off site or had other personal like reasons to not be on the show, John would be on there. And so John was just like doing his own show every single day diligently, and then being the fill-in host like 4 hours later for another show very
mhm,
diligently. And so as much as possible, I would try to, and this is what producing is all about in Hollywood, you keep
mhm.
your talent happy. As much as possible, I would try to shield John from extra work, even if that meant like, oh, I have 2.5 minutes to learn how to host this conversation segment. So I'm going to do this so John can go to sleep.
So, like, you
Yeah.
work also with prominent people, like, we were talking about Jimmy Dore. I am gonna throw a news flash for you that may shock you or may delight you. I've never liked Jimmy Dore even when he was at TYT. So as someone who worked with him, like, worked on, like, the aggressive progressive show, which I've never seen because like, I think it was like under a paywall or something. Um, like was how do I say this? Because I don't like the guy, and I don't want to sound like I'm trying to be sympathetic because I'm not. Um, was he that like difficult to work with? Because I know around the time of the like whole thing with Anna and him, I remember you saying something on Power Report a few years ago that you came in like to the he made fun of you and talked about you in a way that was not appropriate. Um, and so I guess I just have to ask, was he the type of person that we all know that he is or has become? And
Um,
talking as someone who has never really who just hates him, like, even to this day.
yeah, and there's been
I mean, I
I
hate
forget
this
his
guy.
name, but like
I hate
Walter
him.
Michelson. I think there's been a couple of other journalists who have written some stuff about this as well, about that whole Jimmy's Doors demeanor. But yeah, no, this is kind of also known in the comedy scene as well. To the extent that I'm privy to the Los Angeles comedy scene. I've talked to some other comedians. He's they hate working for they hate working for and with the guy.
Mhm,
Um, he's yeah, I mean, I in a number of other personal ways, I've just developed an ability to, again, it's another like Hollywood producer trick to like keep the talent happy.
mhm,
Whenever you are in a situation where like you, if I was like on the sidewalk with you or in a restaurant and in a bar, and if you had said the same thing, I would stand up and say something else. But because it's my job and someone who just said that has the higher firepower, I decide to deflect that and like yes and that into a different kind of way. um that was the sort of skill I had to, and a lot of other folks would have to do with Jimmy Dore, right?
mhm.
um yeah, like folks can check out Power Report. I'm going to save that for people who check out the archive. So good looking out. But yeah, there's a couple. There was one particular time I think is semi-famous where he and Steve O got into a fight about whether or not YouTube should have been able to censor Alex Jones for his like conspiracy theories. And yeah, it got pretty gnarly and loud and uncontrollable. Like, and again, on TYT, like, no producer is in the business of saying, hey, you can't say that unless
Mhm,
it's like flat out factually not true. But like, if it's an opinion, no one's in the business of saying, hey, yo, you can't say that.
mhm.
Um, so this was like a no, this is just a screaming match, and your fingers are getting into each other's faces to the point where like it could get physical, and I don't want that article. Like
Yeah,
that stops there's a saying that bad publicity is good publicity. It stops being good publicity even in that context. So like I
right.
stopped it there. He had anger issues. I have anger issues from time to time, but like there's a different thing of like, yes, as a producer, I have my role of trying to keep things chill. Also, as a host, you have your role of stature and
Mhm.
like not flying off the handle. And like
Yeah.
even Jank, barely Anna, but like to Anna's credit, during she would be the first one to come and console me and like ask how I was doing on a mental level whenever Jimmy was going off, because I think Anna has had some experience producing for like Jank and has probably had similar moments. And so she, to her credit, like she's a human being. She was nice. She really helped me in those moments. Um, she's had some of those moments herself. It's never been Jimmy Dore level bad. Jank has had some of those moments. They're much rarer than Jimmy Dore's moments, and still they haven't really been that bad. So yeah, I think in a number of different ways, some other things I think other folks again, like you gotten some glistening of this with Anna and Jimmy's spat over sexually harassing comments. Um,
Mhm.
I will leave that there and just say that, like, people have had experiences with Jimmy Dore they don't like, right?
Yeah.
And so, I think that's to them to tell that story should they choose to do that. Um, but yeah, I think overall, like he was a particularly difficult person to work with, which I think has been proven by like I think he had a really weird NDA at some point. Um,
Yeah, there was
just a lot.
something written about him, in a post about his, like, even on his own show, but let me just say, first of all, I'm very sorry that you had to work with someone like that. I'm sorry that you had to, like, experience the difficulty of working with an older, gentleman with just not being professional to a younger crowd. You don't deserve that,
I mean, it's
and
like honestly, like it's again, maybe I internalize a lot of this stuff, but like, woe is me. There's still way worse things to have to deal with, and again, Jimmy had I'm angry about this person. Can you do something about it? Power,
Mhm.
but Jank had higher firepower, and Jank liked me, and Jank understood that Jimmy was Jimmy,
Was
and so
problematic.
I never felt again. I will never have a job where I can raise my voice at the boss, the lead talent, and the boss's nephew the way I did on a routine basis as I did at TYT. So let me tell you, like that's a different style of workplace,
Yeah.
and I appreciate that Jank like he realizes he's a blowhard and that he likes hiring other blowhards. And so if you're gonna be a blowhard, you have almost too much leeway, and that maybe that's a blessing and a curse as far as like Jank as an executive goes, to be frank. But
Mhm.
I never like other folks will be in that kind of experience and they'll like snap at the talent and then they'll go like, "Oh my god, my job's in danger." And I never thought that for a second. And Jank never made that feel that way for a second. He was just like, okay, it's your turn to be mad at Jimmy. Everyone's done this. I think it just like makes sense on a professional level for y'all to apologize, but like for
I'd be
better or
too
worse, he's not in trouble and you're not in trouble. So yeah.
ner I mean, again, I don't like him, but I mean, I never have, but it's just like, he just comes across as a scary person that even if you try to confront him, you're gonna get spit fire,
Here's the
and
thing. I'm sorry, last thing, I promise this will be quick. He's not scary, he's a little bitch. Because
yeah.
when I ran into the room and when I told him to stop, Steve O just turned around. Um the other two people who were on the show, one of which I think is Jimmy's wife, just turned around.
Oh,
Jimmy was
snap.
the only one who like jumped and like went back and lunged back like, "Oh god, scary black man." And I'm like the least scary black person ever. He was the only one who like lunged back and jumped when I like
Oh my
raised my voice
god.
and jumped in and yelled. I'm not saying it's a racial thing. I'm just saying Jimmy Dore's a little bitch. Like just because
Yeah.
he yells a lot and wears a stupid hat and talks about the Debbie Wasserman Schultz and like because he's that guy does not mean he's that guy. All right.
Ugh. Uh, yeah. He is a very quite a character, a very problematic character, but a character nonetheless. But, that was funny. That was funny. The hat was just hilarious.
I had that from Hotep Report, so I had that very closely. You got lucky for that one. You got some
Yeah,
content there.
there you go. Yeah, I wish I knew how to clip so I could just clip. I'm gonna try to learn how to clip YouTube videos so I could just take some clips of this and like post it individually on my channel. Um, I guess transitioning from TYT, um, how did I guess I'll kind of like condense the last two questions. Like I had like a whole other like side of page, but we're at our hour, so I'm gonna have to like wrap this up. But like
Warned you.
yeah. So, um, how did Power Report become like how did you start it? And how'd you meet most importantly, how did you meet Bam? Who I just really like I am like I think you have a really great producer. If that's what like producer, co-host. I don't know what his title is specifically, but he's awesome. Just so you know.
Um,
And please tell him that if you see him when you see
25%
him.
of me hates you gassing Bam up this much.
Oh, okay.
75% of me loves it because I've always had this appreciation for Bam and his like political speaking, which is why, not totally why, but like partially why we've gotten along and why partially other people have realized we've had this talent together, politically speaking. And so we've worked well together in that context. Um, but no, yeah, thank you. I cannot wait to tell Bam that. This is but 2024 is the year of gassing up Bam because this is the year
Yeah.
Bam gets his due. Anyways, so yeah, I was doing TYT, and I won't get into the
Mhm.
full story because you got to save some game for free. You give out some game for free. You got to save some game for whatever, right? But like,
Yeah.
you know, it was very clear that my efforts were going to be going into Anna's show and John's show. And let's be honest, I wasn't really putting any effort into Jimmy's show and Hassan's stuff and Francis's stuff, and like nothing involving me on camera very much unless I pushed for it every here and there. Right.
Mhm. Right.
My favorite TYT video that I did was when Ben Shapiro got like mollywopped by a conservative commentator on BBC in the United Kingdom, and he thought that he was talking to a liberal, and he was talking to like their Bill O'Reilly, and he just like Tekken 8 Super Smash Brothers like quadruple comboed Ben Shapiro. Like it was so funny. Um, but I wasn't getting a lot of those opportunities, and so there was always Power Report on the side. Before that, I was just knowing that I knew how to, create content and do content and grow it if I wanted to and had the time to dedicate to it, but also knew that I would not want to talk about politics all the time. I started Audio Face, which was a music podcast with Sean, who is generally busy when we do Power Report, but still
Mhm.
does Audio Face, the music podcast for me from time to time. And he comes on Power Report for certain situations when I can, especially when it has to do with aviation and unions. So like the Boeing stuff, any of the aviation strikes, because that has to deal with some of his professional work. But no, so we had done Audio Face since 2017. It was like a music podcast. We occasionally make it political, but we want to make it music wise because, quite frankly, especially at a time right now when platforms are, you know, tamping down on things that have to do with politics, it's good to have a music angle into things so you can like transcend that if you need to, while still having your own voice to some extent. But people, Bam was doing this really wonderful, revolutionary conversation style thing in person called Free Discussion Society, where he would have people, come together in a group, speak for only a certain period of time on a certain topic to answer a certain question. Everyone in the room gets to speak, and then there's a time to respond. And it was like really structured, and you didn't really get arguments. You really got people trying to meet each other halfway or at least in the middle. And he was really good at facilitating conversations. Not only has he always had a really good understanding of international politics through his doing a podcast about international football or soccer. And so basically, me and Bam had always had a joke that whenever the United States starts dropping bombs again, we will do a podcast, because otherwise we don't want to do a political podcast. It's takes a lot out of Bam. It takes a lot out of me, as folks can see from my most recent episode where I was just screaming, or like one of my most recent episodes, I was just screaming a lot. Um, and I was already doing it at TYT, so it just took a long time, right? But we said,
Mhm.
okay, if this ever happens, we will do the Syndicate 23 political report. Syndicate 23 being the worker co-op company that produces Dan from the Internet, Audio Face, and now Power Report. But it was called the Syndicate 23 political report as a working title. And we said, okay. And it was a running joke for 2 years. Like, okay, as long as we don't drop any bombs, we're not going to do this podcast. But the moment we do, we're going to start the Syndicate 23 political report. And then January 2020, like January 3rd, 2020, we drop bombs in the Middle East. Trump drops bombs in the Middle East, the mother of all bomb situation. And
Mm-hmm.
so Bam and I in the group chat are like, we're men of our word, honestly. And so Caesar, who has been on Power Report in the past, he's going to be joining more in the future as well. We just got the schedules to work out again. Um, Along with Sean, we all got together in my tiny ass room at the time, and I had my like little webcam, and we shot the first episode of the Syndicate 23 political report. And we just did this like once a month of like, okay, we're reacting to leftist media as leftist media is reacting to right wing media. And we're synthesizing that because we don't hear our opinions anywhere else. And we started hearing some of our opinions, and then we started hearing some of our opinions, and those people just go into like crazy directions. And so it felt really important to like not only hone our message in, but like as we kept doing the show, we stumbled into the pandemic, and we stumbled into George Floyd, and we stumbled
Mm-hmm.
into Supreme Court decisions, and we
Yep.
stumbled into Supreme Court picks. And
Mm-hmm.
so Bam and I were like, okay, yeah, we're really doing this. And so we stumbled across a name. None of us are really happy with it, but we like, or at least I like the, especially me, because ultimately I get the final say. I like the context of power, and so that's why we went with Power Report. Um, and so yeah, we kind of started from there. I wanted it to be like ultimately whatever I want it to be. So it's been more panel episodes because that's easy for me to like schedule with my busy work schedule as I'm like moving a lot of things around in my personal life. But the Power Report has been interview episodes. Sometimes there are episodes I still need to get out with like wonderful people. It has been panel episodes, which I really enjoy, because I like the premise or the format of Bill Maher, where like someone gives a special comment, maybe, but ultimately you have a panel of people of a varying level of opinions who are talking things out. Maybe they agree, but a lot of times they're, really hashing out opinions. And then
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you devote a show because, like, we just need to talk to an expert here because this is a really important thing going on, or this is a really important thing going under the news. So it's like Rachel Maddow, Breakfast Club, real time, but like for the left, and trying to highlight um diverse perspectives, different
Mm-hmm.
people of color, different gender expressions, like really the whole gamut. Because yeah,
People
the
with
left and the
disabilities.
yes, exactly, and the broader creator sphere is much bigger and much broader than the folks who have had the opportunity, like a Sam Cedar, like a Young Turks, etc., to build 20 years of infrastructure to do a show all the time. Like you have a bunch of really great folks that, shout out to Leftist Mafia,
Mm-hmm.
the Surfs and Rational National, and
Humanist report.
all the,
Yep.
yes, everyone who's been within there. Um, they are doing great things within their own niches as well for the left. And I think it's just important to have that broader ecosystem exist.
Not
Dan's
so
track
easy.
and field comment. I forget. I forget what I said about track and field. I used to run cross country though.
I never played sports as a kid. Never. I mean, I kind of wish I did now. I wish I'd played. My sister played track, and like she ran track in high school. I kind of wish I had done something in high school as well. I was in the newspaper, on the high school newspaper. That's kind of what got my interest in journalism and then broadcasting, and then doing stuff like this. Like it's like a real interesting transition. But I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, no, I think that's great. High school journalism taught me more about news literacy than anything else has, in a formal context afterwards. Like I've read a lot of articles and I've seen a lot of like
Hmm.
presentations and talks on like news literacy since then, of course. But in a classroom setting, taking high school journalism was really important because it's not just about like, okay, this is how a print newspaper gets made and all this other like somewhat innocuous stuff. It's more about building a bullshit detector. It's like
Yeah.
understanding, okay, this is how professional news is done. And you may like it, you may not, but this is how you can take, nutrients from it. And it's like your digestive system. This is how you can take nutrients from it, and this is how you can take the rest and treat it as waste and just spew it somewhere else. Like just like
Hmm.
ignore it and just like throw it away, right?
Yeah.
I think that was a really, if anyone watching, knows middle school or high school kids and they're like worried about them or their friends, a really great thing is to just have them take a high school journalism class. It's much cheaper and probably more helpful than a journalism degree.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of journalists who would agree with that.
I am kind of in between college right now, but I'm like studying journalism. I've been wanting to study journalism for a long time, and like took my senior year of high school. I was on like the newspaper, they call it the class paper and or the school paper. And I can't tell you how many like grinding stories I had to come up with. And I really wanted to do like actual stories you would find in a newspaper, like you'd find in the local paper that like care, like news and politics and like, not just this like pop culture stuff, which the paper became. It became like a tabloid. I mean, like Chris Brown beating up Rihanna at that time, if you remember that. I mean, that's what kind
Oh,
of
not
made the
enough
front
people
page.
remember that. Yeah. Believe me,
It's
I do a music podcast where everyone's like, review the new Chris Brown. I'm like, no, he's a wife beater. Screw that.
yeah. Or yeah, it's just like I tried to make the paper more informal, and I feel like I failed, and I've been living with that for almost a decade. So I hope what I've done here for with this show is kind of making up for that. You know what I mean?
Well, I don't think, especially in a school context, because I did, I wouldn't necessarily call it journalism because I didn't work for a newspaper, but I worked for like a satirical magazine, and I led a satirical magazine when I was in college, and I had a sort of senior role in the newspaper when I was in high school, right?
Mhm.
And that's like 1 year, 2 years at best when you're doing that, because ultimately you're focusing on everything else that you're doing in that educational period of time. But if anything, especially if you get there to like 2 years, the best you can do, I think, is just figure out what you hate, make it slightly better, and make it a process so that the people you ultimately pass it to when you
Mhm.
eventually either get burned out or have to move on because of time, graduation reasons, um, are better off than how you found it. It's kind of like
Yeah.
nature if you ever go camping. It's like leave it the way you found it or better. So that's kind of the perspective I've had. And I think that's applicable to activism because in that video, Bad News, Dan from Net 20, I talk about how 50 to 55% of people who practice activism of some kind, um, they, or, like get involved in activism or get like, facilitate activist spaces, they end up quitting afterwards and never coming back. Like they never end up like joining the fight again. Like it's always good to like take mental health breaks to understand how that happens and to,
Right.
do that. But some people get so burned out and so tired, they, like put in their 2 weeks, right? They're just like, I can't do this anymore, period, full stop, end of sentence. And that's difficult because y- again, everyone wants to try to leave things better than how they found it so that the next person can carry on the torch a little bit, and
Yeah.
that gets a lot harder when you're just burning people out. And so you
Yeah.
want to think about that consciously, I think, with whatever you're building and whatever you're doing is like, how do you make it sustainable? And then how do you build so that, even if you can't live up to that, and that's not doesn't mean like, again, like I don't think you failed. I think
Hmm.
as long as you're just, pushing things, nudging things a little bit forward, you're playing your part, right? And you can
Hmm.
never fully succeed or fully fail. You just play your part to push into everything. Like I made it easier for I made it much easier for all of TYT's producers to continue doing what they're doing for better or
Hmm.
worse.
Yeah.
Um, and so when I left, it was much easier to train new producers than it was when
Right.
I was being trained. Um, and that's been the same way with other jobs I've had over the past 4 years. And what I'm trying to do overall as a facilitator of a co-op, right? So
Right.
I think as long as you aspire to slight nudging and slight pushing, you're good. You didn't
Yeah.
really fail.
It's kind of like the same way with the mods, like being like I was trained as a mod by Adrian Vixen. And it's
Shout out
like,
Adrian Vixen.
yeah, and
And
like
shout out Gale, who's also in the chat.
Fightingale, who is like my one of my best friends. I will say that. Oh, hey Philippe. Um, who is like one of my best friends, asked me, "Did I see the clip I made? You posted in the chat." I if you probably send it to me, I'll probably see it. But I've been trying to look at the chat while we're having this interview because I want to kind of engage with the chat as well because I don't do that often. I realize, and I want to kind of do that
It's
as
hard.
well.
It's a skill on its
Yeah,
own.
yeah. Um, it's like I was trained as a mod, and it's like Adrian trained me, and then they were told um by the head moderator, whose name, out of respect, will remain nameless. Was told, well, we can't. They couldn't do that. They couldn't train me, and it just felt like it would be nice to have a current mod train a newcomer mod. You know what I mean? But at any event, like I don't regret the decision that we made by quitting the mod team this summer, and I'm sure V and Adrian feel the same way, as does Forbezilla, as does Spectrophonic, Roller Dragon, uh, Goddess Four Winds, amongst the others who left. I should shout them out appropriately because we all did. And Dan, personally, I want to thank you for being in our corner. I really, 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 really want to thank you for supporting us and giving us a voice and actually, showing our letter. I mean, yeah, Vidingale also says, uh, yeah, no regrets, like none whatsoever. I mean, I would do it again tomorrow if I had to. It is just, it's really a pain to see them go down this route. I mean, this network that I've watched since 2008, and to see them like, you know, just become problematic and be transphobic. And
Yeah,
I'm just gonna say it.
and as we're doing that,
Oh,
I agree with everything you said, and it's really not a problem. Like it's a pleasure, and it's not a problem. It's the least I can do as far as any sort of representation goes. Like I, th- there was nothing additive that TYT was giving me
mhm,
compared to the negative of being associated, even inadvertently, at least from my position, with um yeah, a lot of what was being expressed on that show. And so like if you've made this entire interview, so kind of like winding down a bit, I want
mhm,
folks to be able to kind of get a sense of where I'm coming from. Is that I went on my own journey from this is my anchor right now. Oh, they're problematic. New anchor. Oh, they're problematic. New anchor. Oh, they're problematic. I'm using anchor in like a very literal sense, is like a what is keeping you, on your boat and attached to safe ground. But you could also use an anchor as in like pundit, right? And I went
mhm,
from a Keith Olbermann to a Dylan Madigan to a Cenk Uygur to other people right now.
Yeah.
I think if I had just stuck with Amy Goodman the whole time, I may have had easier ride, a much more depressing ride, but maybe a little more easier of a ride. Um, but every once in a while, doesn't have to be every year, but everyone does the new year, new me thing.
Yeah.
Reevaluate who you're consuming media from and make sure that they are people who are adding to your repertoire, who are adding to your tool belt, who are encouraging you and motivating you to take positive, affirmative, tangible action in your communities, whatever that may mean, versus, getting into outrage cycles and getting into doom cycles and,
Hmm.
potentially getting into regressive viewpoints for the sake of trying to meet someone in the middle. And I think that can apply to a lot of things that TYT has done. And unfortunately, I think that's also equally applicable to a lot of MSNBC and CNN and, like mainstream sort of media, right? And
Hmm.
so be smart about that. We all consume these different things. And so,
Hmm.
a lot of stuff people watch the normal people. If we were all normal, and maybe there's some like crossover normal people out there, we would just be watching The Office. And this
Yeah.
conversation would just be about like, hey, there's The Good Place. Hey, there's Abbott Elementary. Like, hey,
Yeah.
like there's a lot of other different comfort shows out there. You just need to
There's
kind of
Steve Carell. There's Rainn Wilson. Just
yeah,
go.
like get out of your comfort zone a little bit. This is the same thing. Understand that, and please watch Dan from the Internet 28, youtube.com/Dan from the Internet under that playlist that I have under specials, right? Like we become consumers of politics and we start to forget that, like, oh, we feel above thee because people who watch the big football game and the all-star game for basketball or hockey or whatever, right? Like we look at them and like, oh, they're just blinded by sports. We're like, well,
Yeah.
we're blinded by the sports of politics.
Right.
And we feel validated because we go out on one day and vote, but that's neither the beginning, middle, nor end of our political action.
Right.
And if you're not consuming media that is not constantly emphasizing that, as we do on Power Report, but as I think a lot of folks do on the left very well by interviewing experts, by focusing on direct leftist action, by pushing the boundaries of both liberal complacency and right wing fascism, support those folks. Support that media because
Yeah.
that's what's going to make things really start to happen for us. And honestly, that's what we're going to need because if Republicans do really well in 2024, then listen, everyone in media is going to be great. Let me tell you right now, a Republican in office is great stuff for people in leftist media, right?
Yeah. Because
um,
we
it's
have.
people are going to be paying attention. People are going to be outraged all the time, but outrage cycles create liberals. They create
Yeah.
reactionaries. All right. I am okay, one of the great things of having a day job is that I really, really don't, and this is apparent by the fact that I should be posting more clips of PowerPoint so folks actually see it more, is like, I really, really, really don't need to be doing this. I could just be a normal person, but I am detached from the incentives of doing this for a living just enough so that I can speak my mind and I can do what I came into this business to do, which is to create coalitions and to create power so that we actually start to move the needle on serious issues in this world. Anyone who's not interested in that, fuck them. Like flat out, I don't care. I get out of my way, get out of our way, because we need true leftist progress more than ever in the name of all that is good, in the name of the people who have unfortunately passed too soon because of our lack
Yeah.
of leftist progress. um Rip to the Like rest in
Right.
power to the non-binary individuals who have died in the past week and month because of our inaction as a country, to the
Mhm.
black and brown and indigenous folks who have died because of our inaction of a country in the past day, week, month, 4 years, 10 years, forever. And I'm on the side of the country that wants to, maybe avenge is the wrong word, but if necessary, yes, avenge. But I'm on the side that wants to make sure that those sacrifices in life and in work and in labor are not done in vain. So
Yeah.
you're either with me or against me in that point. And I think there's a large 10 as far as with and against goes, but that's where I stand.
Yeah. Um, well, this has been an awesome, like, almost 2 hours. I feel like I should just we'll hit the 2-hour mark. I know you say you're busy. I know you have to go out of town tomorrow. I don't want
Yeah, no, you're all good. I can give you, I'm really hungry, but
I
like,
you I
I
haven't
can go to
had
like,
dinner yet, so
me neither. I can go like 5 more minutes if you have anything else you want to like get in.
get in. So I guess where does the name Dan from the internet come from? Just the last kind of humorous, lighthearted question.
I w- I wish I could be long-winded and give you a good answer. I just came up with it. It was really clever, and people um started using that as my name more than they knew my name, to the point where like a lot of people don't know my last name, and I'm honestly fine with that.
I actually I would say I know your last name because you said it on Leftist Mafia a while back, but I'm not gonna repeat it.
It's not hard to find, and I don't care if people find it, and even then it's not my entire name, so jokes on everyone, because that's super not online. Because I'm not gonna get into it anymore
No,
because I'm
you
very
don't need
respectable.
to.
But yeah. I literally, the first time I was like, I made it on, I was an intern at TYT, and we did
Mhm.
a thing called Twitter Storm at the time, where we would take like
Yeah, I
tweets,
remember that.
and like sometimes Kim Horcher would read them, and then sometimes other folks would read them. Well, I got to read them one time, and they're like, okay, well, what do we put on your lower third? And I'm like, put Dan from the internet. And they're like, okay, that's
And it
cool.
stuck.
And like, there were times where Anna or Jenk, like literally Jenk, would be like, what's your last name? Dave Kohler, who was like doing a lot of HR things at the time, would be like, hey, for tax purposes, I can't put Dan from the internet. So like, I did some super inside baseball. I did some consulting work for the Majority Report last year. And I had the same issue with Sam Cedar. He was like, yeah, so this is my Sam Cedar impression. So what I'm saying is, the idea that we only know you as Dan from the internet and not as your actual name is a real big problem for our taxes. So like, yeah, that that occasionally, like, it's almost too good of branding, but I'm happy with it, yes. And there have been some like fun cheesy jokes of like, oh, Dan from the internet, what happens when the internet goes out? And the answer is like a cheesy 90s half 2D half 3D Disney movie. I just like start to fade into dust when your internet starts to go out. I just like flicker into the wind, just like like my shirt, it just like digs into the waves, like
I could just honestly, before we went on, you mentioned like your shirt would like blend in with your bluish background. I was like, it really does like work well for you. That's a good shirt, by the way. I'm just gonna say it.
I'm wearing it
Very tie
backwards
dye.
because if I were wearing it forwards, the person who I got this shirt for has since been extremely canceled. So
No.
I'm just, I'm about, again, I'm about to travel, so I'm not wearing my good clothes. I'm just wearing stuff I wouldn't normally wear, but even this I wouldn't wear as just like walking outside. So I've flipped it around.
You
So
live it and
yeah,
you also don't you live in California? You don't have
I
to say
does,
where at.
yes, I
Is it
do.
like really like super hot in there? Because it I get a feeling like it doesn't really snow there much. Or at least
Um,
what I read. I might be misreading something.
California is a really awesome, like politics aside and everything else aside, like just as a piece of land, as a partition of land, California rocks. In the same day, you can experience like the hot desert, the peaks of the mountains with snow. Um, because it rained recently, I live near the beach, and I was gonna say like near the end of the day, you can like have a bonfire near the beach. You can do all of that in the same day. People do like you have to start at 3 a.m., but like people do that in an entire day, and you really can. Like it's an amazing, it's God state, honestly.
Yeah.
But you can. What was I gonna say? It's pretty fine weather because sorry that's what I was gonna say because it's been raining a lot here. Um, when it rains near the beach, it um snows in the mountains, which are only all of LA is really just like a big valley that just happens to hug a coast. And so the mountains are barely 40, 50 miles away from the ocean. The only thing stopping you and making that a long journey that isn't just like, an hour traveling at roughly 50 miles an hour is traffic. And the
Mhm.
fact that like millions upon millions upon millions upon millions of people live here and there's no like straight shot to get there, to get to any
Mhm.
one place. And so we have everything in really close distance. It's just hard to get to everything because we have a lot of people and we gutted our public transportation system. That's a teaser for
Yeah.
a from the internet project, but yes.
Yeah. So I guess it was probably easier. This might sound off the wall, but that it was probably easier to like just fly from where you went to college in California to the TYT offices rather than traffic than drive there since there's like really bad traffic from what I hear through
I
the
mean,
grapevine.
traffic, but distance. Like, believe me, if there was a train, and California's been trying to build a train for my entire life, and I'm almost 30, like, to go from Northern California to Southern California very quickly. But nothing beats that. My friends and I call it the 1 hour boom and zoom. That's really all it is. It's just you can either drive 5 to 8 hours, or you can fly 1 hour, and then it's like 45 minutes in either side for security, so 3 hours still. Um, it's a no brainer, unfortunately, which I hate because it's bad for the climate and everything, and it's not as scenic, but
Yeah.
um, like they don't really give you much. It's just like cookies at that point. It's not enough for a meal.
Cookies. Or like what Jon Stewart said on his first show at the Daily Show. I like cookies. I don't know if you saw the chocolate chip cookie that TikTok with he's like,
Yeah.
yeah, chocolate chip cookies. I can't do
Yes,
it,
that's
but it's
great.
funny as hell. Um, so this was great, Dan. I honestly have to say that I thought this was I was honestly really nervous to do this, but I'm actually happy with the outcome of this interview. We went 2 hours. We
Good. I'm
went two
glad.
hours
That's
and
that's
3 minutes and
usually
32.
that's usually how it goes. There's the same with the letter hack. He was like, "Okay, we'll do this. It'll be like 45 minutes or an hour." And it's like, "Good, because I only have an hour 15." And then this happens.
Yeah, the
Now,
unexpected
now you
happened.
see why Bam wants to delete me.
You know what? I hope we could do it another show. I want to do a part two at some point where we can tackle like the stuff that I didn't get to, but also I'd like to do it with Bam. I just, if you
Everyone
could
wants
talk to
Bam.
him and be,
America's craving some Bam. Okay, America's
if you
craving
can
some
talk
Bam.
to
You know
him
what?
for me and just be like, put a good word in.
Well, I'll see what I can do. I'm kind of at this point. We're gonna have to get Bam his own agent, but we'll see what happens.
Tell him like
Yes.
there's this really Midwestern, like leftist guy that's a big fan and has a really good podcast and he'd like to interview you. Or I'd like to interview him.
Can actually ask you a question really quickly? This is what I want to do in the beginning, but
Sure.
I got time. Um, Remind me in the audience again where from the Midwest. So yeah, you're in Kansas City, right, in
Hmm.
Missouri.
Yeah.
Um, is that like where you grew up your entire life? And
Was born in Kansas City and raised later. So I've lived in like Missouri for 31 years.
Okay,
Uh,
so like Missouri and different places.
yeah. So I lived in the small town in like the first like 7 or 8 years of my life, and or actually the first decade of my life, I was in a small town, and then as in my teenage years, I went to the bigger cities, and I came to Kansas City officially in 2005. Lived here for 4 years, went back to the small town briefly, and then came back to the big city when I graduated high school. So
So
yeah,
I
I've
take it
been.
that sorry, I take it that like you and this you kind of answered this a little bit in our discussion, but how did you come to leftist media then? In that
Um,
context, especially given that like I'm sure a lot of folks around you did not like spoon feed it to you.
Yeah, how I came in was, I mean, I guess the elephant in the room would be TYT. I mean, I found them in 2008 as a sophomore in high school and got hooked. And you just started watching like pretty much every leftist show and podcast I found through TYT because they would always have them on as guests, as panelists, you know. And so, um, and then obviously, in July, was it June or July of 2020, uh, the late great Michael Brooks died, and that was hugely effective. And I started consuming a lot of, content, started reading a lot of, books, media, and around 2020, people started actually doing their own podcast, their own Twitch stream. And so for about a year, I was like, oh, I want to do that. I mean, I tried to get into broadcasting through, you know, job shadowing at my local TV station, and that didn't work. And then just started watching Twitch and realizing this is the new form of broadcasting. It's like a DIY kind of thing, and I would probably be better suited for that. And so, yeah, lo and behold, August of 2021, I started a YouTube channel, and well, 2020 I did the YouTube channel, but the year later I started the show and did it part time. I was in school, trying to get my bachelor's. Like I said, I'm like between college right now, so um, that kind of thing, living off the government system.
Wait,
Um,
so like were you just perusing YouTube already and then just the algorithm was just like you want TYT, or was it like a particular political topic that
um,
like evangelized you in a certain
Probably
way?
the how do you say, the former than the latter, was just perusing YouTube and just
Mhm.
like looking at all these content creators, and some of them I actually liked, and then
Okay,
others
so
kind
like
of
what are
like,
some
"Nah."
other are there any content creators that are still creating content today that are from that era of YouTube discovery that you still follow? To answer the question for myself really quickly, I'm a big like tech nerd, if you can't tell by
Mhm.
like even my weed device is a piece of tech.
Oh,
But
one of them.
MKBHD, Marquez Brownlee, I love. I mean, like I don't. I disagree with him a lot of times, um, but I really appreciated this guy as not only just like a black creator, as
Mhm.
well as Kimberly Nicole Foster. Who, fun fact, Kimberly Nicole Foster, who's like a black content creator. She was the first guest on Power Report when we rebranded from the Syndicate 23 Political Report to Power Report.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
episodes 0 through 7, so technically 8 episodes, are season 1 of Power Report. Oh, sorry, they're season, yeah, they are.
Syndicate
That's season
23.
1 of Power Report. And then episode 8 is with Kimberly Nicole Foster, and it's called "The Only Good Kamala Harris Takes." And we did that as coverage of the Democratic convention, where
Mhm.
Joe Biden picked Kamala Harris, and we were trying to make a stance at the time of being like, we are black progressives who can hold at the same time that like we're proud for half black, half Indian Kamala Harris as a woman to being where she is, and also acknowledging that she is very staunchly against progressive values, and like let's not
Right.
fool ourselves about it, right? Because that
Right.
was like a really hard thing to say, and it was something that a lot of white leftists were just like stumbling across because there were nuances.
Yeah.
um So like that stuff like that brought me to the left, but my main question again was like, are there YouTubers? Doesn't have to be politically related, but like, are there YouTubers that you're still into now?
Yeah, I mean, some of the, I mean, this, I don't want to make it too complicated because I know that there's a difference, but because of Adrian Vixen telling me this, that, I will not always agree with them, but I will know where they are coming from. And this does actually fit into the white leftism that you described in a way. I mean, I, and also I come from a very red state, obviously in Kansas City, and to find them and actually have like to know, oh, there's a left there are still leftists like I am here, you know, the Vanguard, you know, God, it's like I talked to Gavin, like I said, in
Oh,
real
look
life.
at that! I found 8 more minutes in my schedule all of a sudden.
Hmm,
No. Go ahead, finish your
okay,
point. And I
okay.
will go ahead.
So like I started watching the Vanguard, last December of 2022 at the recommendation of Adrian Vixen, who again came to me and said, "You will not always agree with them, but hopefully you will come. I will come from like I will find some common ground, basically, if that makes sense." And so like I reached out to them. I told them I liked the show, um, and they also interviewed a local like progressive radio host named Hartzell Gray, who does a podcast called the KC Morning Show. I'll send it to you if you wanna check it out. It's really good. Hartzell is our age. I was born in 92. He was born in 91. And I think you're born in 96, I think, as you mentioned once on Leftist Mafia. So yeah, he is from a local, he's actually from local like Kansas City radio, like the former alternative station that used to be called the Buzz. He's from that station. The Vanguard, Gavin and Zach interviewed him. It's actually a really good interview, I will say, to kind of give them, you know, to just kind of admit. Um, Other than that, obviously, Olamia Lauren is another creator that I like. Uh, you know, yeah, Philippe calls me a nerd in the chat. Yeah, I'm totally a nerd. Uh, you know, as you mentioned, and I can't quite, as you mentioned once on Leftist Mafia, nerd. I'm not following you, Philippe. Uh, yeah. Well, here's the thing. Yeah, I make nerds look good. I'll be honest with you. I make nerds look
That you
good,
do.
totally.
Can I can I
So
can I get this like off my chest here? So,
sure.
um, yeah, I there. Let me choose my words carefully because of reasons. Um, at one point, Vanguard made a video about me
Hmm.
that was about, you know, I had dramatized this a little bit, but basically it was like my annoyance with Kyle Kalinske over his kids' gloves with Joe Rogan at the time. And I was pointing out how, first of all, Power Report, first show on the left, as far as I know, first show on the left in February 2022 was talking about rail workers unions
Hmm.
before the East Palestine thing happened in Ohio, because Joe Rogan had shared this like, propaganda thing about how railways in Los Angeles, like, freight, because we have the port of Los Angeles Long Beach, which is the one of the biggest ports, America's biggest port on the West Coast, and one of the biggest ports in the world, and one of America's biggest ports, period. Um, how there was constant looting on those trains, and people were like, "Oh no, crime is just so insane in Los Angeles," and it's all, the kind of stuff that I've complained about certain leftists falling for a while. and Joe Rogan was talking about this. You do like some, hey Jamie, can you Google that real quickly style as research, like very bare minimum Googling. And what you discover is that BNSF, which is one of these like big railway monopolies, freight
Mhm.
monopolies, had laid off a bunch of their workers using similar tactics that, yeah, Bad Lefty is correct here. They sacked their workers using similar tactics that folks from McKinsey of Pete Buttigieg, fame. By the way, Secretary of Transportation, not sure if that's relevant, but more on that later, right? Um, but using these same sort of strategies of how can you run big trains, like long trains for a long period of time with as few security and as few people conducting and engineers running the trains, right? And people on staff if things go wrong. So that was the infrastructure that was happening. That's why you were getting this increase in, freight robberies, was because you had fewer people who were there to do the job that they were originally going to do in protecting those trains. Joe Rogan had fallen for this, and I was like, wow, Joe Rogan's falling for this really big thing. This is the same month that I don't remember exactly why, but like, I think maybe that same month or a couple months before, Kyle Kalinske was bragging about texting Joe Rogan about paternity leave involving, ironically enough, Pete Buttigieg, and saying that, like, hey, you should lay off of paternity leave because it actually is important and European countries have this, that, and the other thing. And Kyle Kalinske was using that and continued using that example as a point for why Joe Rogan is, gettable. He's like, it helps to have solidarity with someone like that who you may not agree with all the time because they are gettable, they are understandable. And, I agree with that on principle. I just never thought that. I mean, like, I haven't thought that about Joe Rogan since at least 2020 when he went all pandemic crazy, right? And so,
Mhm.
to wrap that up, like Kyle Kalinske was taking that stance of like, hey, listen, stop attacking Joe Rogan from the left because he's someone that we can get to. I literally have him on speed dial. I've been on his show. Kyle Kalinske was part of his 2020 election coverage, if folks remember that really quickly. And so, like, yeah, I am all down for leftist strategery. Like, believe me, if we think that Joe Rogan can be like an idiot mouthpiece for the left just as much as he's an idiot mouthpiece for the right, Yahtzee, I'm down for that. And I can like understand that and express that to my audience and maybe temper my coverage with that context. But that's not the case because for every like one Cornell West he has on, he has five Brett Weinsteins and Jordan Petersons and Ben Shapiro's. And when he's not having them on, he's asking random comedians about like, hey, I love that new comedy special you have on Netflix. Don't you hate cancel culture? And what about trans people in sports, right? Which brings me to like my main thing to bring it back to the Vanguard. So I was commenting about how, like, okay, Kyle Kalinske, we're playing your strategy of, I mean, I'm not, but like, let's take your strategy to its logical conclusion. Joe Rogan is popping off complete misinformation about trans people in general and trans people in sports. All right. Like, he's bringing it up to experts and non-experts. He doesn't really have any experts on, but like, quote unquote experts, and then non-experts is in like comedians and entertainers, right?
Right.
Like, just talking about this over the course of his 3-hour spiel. And he continues to like spit all of this like weird misinformation that makes no sense. And as you can tell, again, unfortunately and tragically, as we're hearing the news of Next Rest in Power in Oklahoma and, a number of other trans, you know, deletings and self-deletings that have been happening over the years since 2020 and previously, that this is a really serious issue on the left. And so if you're going to like, to me, if I were Kyle Kalinske, I would use this as an opportunity to go, okay, I was able to convince Joe Rogan off the ledge on paternity leave. Maybe I can use this stance to um push him, or like pull him from the ledge on trans issues, because this is getting really bad with dozens and dozens and now hundreds and hundreds of pieces of anti-trans legislation being passed throughout the country in state legislatures, and a lot of that being fueled by guests on Joe Rogan's podcast who are salting the earth for this kind of rhetoric, for normies to understand it, and then Fox News has it, and then sycophants like Ted Cruz start to push it on the state level and on the federal level. Like, this is an ecosystem that Joe Rogan is a part of, that Kyle Kalinske claims to be able to tap into to do for good. And at the same time as this is happening, that, Joe Rogan's N-word compilation is flying around for like the 15th time, Kyle Kalinske keeps making video after video going, hey, look, I cherry picked a moment where Joe Rogan's actually being a leftist. Isn't he not so bad? And so I made a comprehensive video about this. I kicked off all the guests of Power Report on a week. I did like a special comment style thing. And Vanguard turns it into this, as they do, because they found for a while that leftist drama gets them clicks for a while, right? Happens. You people eat the slop, so y'all are part of the problem as well. They picked it up and then just like totally took that story out of context, totally tried to make this like this really small, petty kind of thing, and then threw it away. 3 weeks later, had an interview with Kyle Kalinske like on their show, The Vanguard. Several months later, photos of them show up at Kyle's wedding. And a lot of what I was saying in that thing was a critique of Kyle Kalinske. As a fan of Kyle Kalinske, much as I got sick of Keith Olbermann, much as I got sick of Cenk Uygur, much as I got sick of Jimmy Dore, I got sick of Kyle Kalinske because Kyle Kalinske used to rail against access journalism. Kyle Kalinske used to rail against the idea that you tamper your coverage and you change that coverage and you give people, more benefit of the doubt than you usually would, because you have personal access to them and you believe deep down that like they're not really like that, and they're just misguided. And again, you can do that to a certain extent. I feel really close to this with the TYT situation, as I've explained. But either you use that power to fight against that, or you go on camera and you stand up and say you don't stand by that. And I think that's where a lot of people kind of agree with that too, like that those are the two strongest, best courses of action. And within that, there's like politicking going on there within some way, maybe justified, maybe not, but that is exactly where I was really upset with Kyle Kalinske, is that you've been railing about access journalism on MSNBC and CNN since Blog Talk Radio. I was listening to him on those days, right, in 2008. Okay, I'm a nerd. I am a nerd. Okay, so we're in good company. All right, but the fact that in this case he was playing access journalism to Joe Rogan while trans people were dying was too much for me. Too much for me. Again, a year before, Cenk and Anna's big transgressions, no pun intended. And this is why I'm glad that we do Power Report, is because like we sniff this stuff out, and I don't mind flexing the people that I know to get like big guests and big interviews because they're talking about these things and I have those connections. I also don't mind breaking those connections because I worked with a lot of these people through getting to these opinions, and I want to practice access journalism in the sense that I know a lot of people and I want to connect these people so that even though we don't all work under some big umbrella that is like, a media outlet, right? Which sucked and had, editors telling us what we couldn't do and incentives that didn't make sense, that affected our journalism itself. And we can do our own things. But by being connected, we can start to use that as a force for political power and political change because we all have a lot of common values, right? But I don't want to use that access journalism to the point where I'm like, if I'm saying, hey, I would really attack this, but I'm balancing this other thing about them. And so this is why I'm cutting them some slack in the situation. I'm going to say that on air, whether or not that person that I'm close to or I'm connected to likes that or not, because I'm going to make sure my audience at least knows I'm making that consideration if I'm doing that. Not this
Mhm.
fake game of, oh, I'm going to ignore the elephant in the room that is directly, in my opinion, directly causing like the deaths and at bare minimum, like the pain of LGBTQ, like kids and adults across the country. And like all of this legislation, like adding fuel to that fire. Like, I cannot contribute to that. I can't understand people who can just like do that and go, okay, well, I cherry picked one good thing he did this month. And so my video coverage is going to be on that and not on the fact that I'm bragging about having him on speed dial and I could talk to him about something that could maybe talk one parent off of the ledge of kicking their trans daughter or son out of the house. Like, that's what I'm talking about. Like, Kyle Kalinske has that ability to save one one kid, one adult. And if he's not doing that and he's instead running cover for him, and ultimately I covered how Kyle Kalinski's audience started trashing him. And now he has changed his path. Kyle Kalinske has thankfully gotten much better on trans issues. But, you know, I have talked about um I'm sorry, I've talked for a long time, but like I've talked about being on, hashing this out and explaining what I'm talking about here on
Mhm.
Vanguard. And I've gotten nothing but they unblocked me and followed me back, but won't respond to any DMs. Um, I've gotten nothing from Kyle, who, again, we used to be good friends. I mean, like, not good friends, but like we used to talk and communicate from time to time. And we've taken photos and selfies together and joked around a lot. And, I think he's a good person generally, but I just, again, I saw this thing and I noticed this thing and I got a lot of other people to notice this thing. And it seems like he is making a little bit of recompense for it, but I haven't seen that connection. I haven't seen that acknowledgement. And I think me and my audience at PowerPort at youtube.com/Dan from the internet and a lot of other folks who have witnessed this from Kyle, and I think more broadly, would benefit from watching this discussion of let's acknowledge what you did wrong and let's acknowledge how, like, let's acknowledge you acknowledging that as a host, because hosts always seem like this, like, we know everything, we know it all, and we're never going to admit we're wrong because that defeats the purpose. And I think that, something that Jenk and Anna will never do, it would be helpful to, walk through the process in public of let's acknowledge you did this thing wrong, let's acknowledge that this is antithetical to your longtime premise against access journalism, among other things. Let's acknowledge that you've been doing a lot better since this time, but let's also like put this all together and make this a learning moment so that, if you want to be a bridge for reason or logic and really start to convert people and show people that, like, the left is not like rabid and vicious,
Mhm.
let's model the process of acknowledging fault and learning through it and taking real tangible material steps towards fixing it, which I think they've done the beginning and the end, but just not the middle. Specifically Kyle, a little bit of crystal ball, but like specifically Kyle.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's important for us to grow. I think it's important for us to acknowledge that we have faults. I think it's important for us to acknowledge that there are blind spots, and that if they're willing to acknowledge the fault, then they decide they want to grow. then I commend them for it, you know? But if they're just gonna go down this, like, rabbit hole of just basically being a bigot, you know, a racist, transphobic, you know, ableist, person like Anna and Jank have been, then I give no credence for that, and I'm sure you don't as well. So, um, well,
2.5 hours, John.
yeah, two and a
What
half
can I
hours.
do, man?
It went long. It went, yeah. Um,
You hungry?
I am. I actually that was
Pizza,
that wasn't
pizza.
yeah. I have a pizza in the freeze in the refrigerator waiting for me, and a can of orange soda as well. So
God
um
bless.
this was very great. It was an interesting conversation. I hope we can do another show in the future.
Yeah,
But
we'll make
I
it
say that
happen. And again, Vanguard, open invitation. At
yes.
at this point, and not only is it Black History Month, but my rare bleep birthday month. The offer is no longer me go on to Vanguard. You're coming on to Power Report. You're staying up late. You're coming on to my turf. Bam's gonna join, and we're gonna hash this out. But let's do it on peaceful terms. Let's make a positive example for the left. But we have some struggle session to do. We have
Yeah,
some, as has been said in the chat, we have
I
some
think it's
restorative justice to do, and I think it'll be positive.
yeah, I think it's
I'm
an
not out. I'm not to snipe. I'm not out to fight. I'm out to just make a point out of something and make
yeah,
an
yeah,
example.
absolutely, and that was kind of my worry, starting off because I
And
have to
if
admit
you want to help with that, please do. Like, please pass the word on.
yeah, it like, for
I'll
me
talk to
anyway,
Bam. You talk to them. Let's make a deal.
I can talk to Gavin, we're in, like, texting conversation, Snapchat conversation, I can try to talk to him, um, yeah, this was a really engaging, very important conversation. Again, you know, you and I and many others are all in the same boat as far as where we are on the left. So this was very, very, really great to talk to you, Dan. I guess to like end it off, I mean, I have it on the Chiron down below, but I guess for just like professional reasons, why don't you plug yourself, plug
Yeah.
your socials.
I have too many things going on in too many different places. So go to danfromtheinter.net. That's danfromtheinter.net. Got that URL a while ago, around the time I came up with the handle. So, we out here. danfromtheinter.net. You'll get the links to my Twitter, my Twitch, my Threads now, my Blue Sky now. Um,
Follow me on Blue
we're,
Sky if you know, by the way, Dan.
oh, send that to me after the show,
Yeah.
in DM or something. But yeah, by the time you may be listening to this, if you're not like, if you're watching on demand, we'll probably have the Syndicate 23 membership all rolled out. So become a member on youtube.com/Dan from the internet, twitch.tv/Dan from the web, or syndicate23.co. That's syndicate23.co, not .com.co. And you can support the little co-op that we're doing, and not just Power Report, but Audio Face. We have a bunch of content. We have a backlog of content. We honestly have more content than any of the other new people flooding the internet right now. So watch this space. It's going to be great. Please support us. We hope to not let you down. We hope to continue being accountable. And if that was all too much for you, as it is, because
No.
I talk a lot, danfromtheinter.net. That's why I created that URL.
And the Power Report, when does it air? And what?
Generally on Thursdays, not next Thursday, because your boy has my once every 4 years birthday, and your boy's not going to be streaming during that.
Yeah. Happy
But
leap happy leap day birthday, by the way.
thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate everyone for all the birthday wishes in advance, and even the people who get it wrong. But yes, generally we're streaming on Thursdays at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, at Twitch, YouTube, Twitter, X, because I can stream there now.
Yeah.
And we're gonna have the podcast version out again soon, so watch out for that. Again, if it's all too much, Dan from the inter.net. That's the easy way. Easy breezy, beautiful cover girl. Easy breezy, beautiful fighting girl. Let's do that.
Yeah, yeah, there we go. Easy breezy that is awesome. Yeah, Dan, thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate this once again. Good luck on your travels. Stay safe, be safe, fly safe. however you're gonna go.
Thank
So
you. It was an absolute blast. Take care, everyone. Take care, everyone on the stream as well. Peace.
peace. All right, that was Dan from the internet from the Power Report. I'm just gonna end it here. I'm not gonna like stay like and do like. I mean, I'll just thank everybody who showed up, like from Vidingale, Adrian Vixen, Fake Lefty, or no, fake name, Bad Lefty, not Philippe, Emo Dragon, Cat K. Let's see who else. Already said not Philippe. Already said. I think that's about it. Or Atticus, Among Us. So yeah. So I won't be able to do a game stream tomorrow because I won't be here, but I will be back on Monday and to do a game stream makeup on Twitch. So until then, have a good evening, a good rest of the weekend, and I will see you then. Peace.